Chapter 21 Meeting Chu Zihan again. Meanwhile, Bai Zihan. He had been hatching countless plans to make Chu Zihan cancel or reject this engagement. If it were anyone else, it would have been easy. Not just easy. Most people wouldn't have even wanted to be engaged if they knew it was him they were betrothed to. But his opponent was Chu Zihan. Someone who could treat him like a mere servant. His usual tricks wouldn't work on her. But in the end, he felt that tricks weren't necessary. As long as I convince her and take all the blame, Chu Zihan will definitely be willing to reject the engagement. He was fairly confident. After all, there wasn't anyone who would willingly marry him. He was more self-aware of his own reputation than anyone else. He assumed that Chu Zihan had been forced into this by her parents or the elders of the Chu clan and had no choice but to marry him. However, if he could take the blame and perhaps shift her marriage to someone else from the Bai clan, he was certain that Chu Zihan would agree to cancel the engagement. Heemph. Sister, see this. This is how you cancel an engagement. Bai Zihan cursed his sister in his mind. He believed Bai Shuking could have taken a similar approach to cancel her engagement if she had truly wanted to. Reaching a mutual agreement while ensuring a smooth resolution without negatively impacting either party. But no. She had to humiliate the protagonist and turn him into an enemy. Although Bai Shuking and the other Bai clan members didn't take her ex-fiancé seriously, Bai Zihan was confident that, in a few years they were going to regret it. Anyway, he had his own problems to worry about and couldn't really check what's up with that ex-fiancé. A report from the guards confirmed that Chu Zihan had arrived and had gone to his sister's place. Should I send someone to bring her here? But Bai Zihan pondered. But before he could decide, young master, Lady Chu wants to see you. A guard arrived to inform him. Finally, Bai Zihan immediately stood up and made his way toward Chu Zihan. As Bai Zihan stepped out of his courtyard, he took a deep breath, mentally preparing himself. Alright, time to make sure this engagement never happens. Soon, he arrived at the reception hall. The moment he stepped in, his eyes locked onto a familiar figure. Chu Zihan sat leisurely on a cushioned chair, one leg crossed over the other, sipping tea as if she owned the place. Her eyes shimmered with amusement the moment she saw him. So, we finally meet again. Young Master Bai, she said with a smirk. Bai Zihan felt a shiver run down his spine. That damn smirk, just seeing it brings back trauma. Still, he quickly regained his composure and forced a smile. Lady Chu, he greeted, giving a polite bow. It's been a long time. Chu Zihan tilted her head, her smirk widening. Oh, that's new. So, why did you want to meet with me? Chu Zihan asked. Lady Chu, I believe we both know why I wanted to meet with you. Chu Zihan raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. This engagement, I think it's a mistake. Bai Zihan continued, feigning deep regret. I know the elders arranged it, but let's be honest, would you really want to be married to someone like me? Chu Zihan leaned back, resting her chin on her hand. Go on, encouraged. Bai Zihan pressed forward. I am well aware of my reputation. I'm not talented. I've made countless mistakes, and I don't have the best character. Everyone in the Bai clan knows this. I am the last person worthy of being your fiancé. He looked her in the eyes, trying to appear as sincere as possible. I have no doubt that you were forced into this. But I don't want you to suffer because of me. If you cancel the engagement, I will take all the blame. I'll make sure no one blames you or your clan. He gave her his most self-sacrificing look. Silence. For a moment, Bai Zihan felt hopeful. That was perfect. There's no way she'd want to marry me after that, right? Right, then. Chu Zihan smiled. Not just any smile. A slow, knowing smile filled with amusement and something far more dangerous. Bai Zihan's heart dropped. Oh wait, why does she look like that? Chu Zihan rested her cheek on her hand, her red eyes gleaming with pure delight. I see. Bai Zihan gulped. Why, you do? Yes. She sat up straight, crossing her arms. I have no intention of canceling this engagement. Chu Zihan declared. Huh. Bai Zihan was confused. He was certain she would accept his proposal to call off the engagement. You seem to be mistaken about something, Bai Zihan, Chu Zihan continued, watching his bewildered expression. Neither my parents nor my elders forced me into this engagement. I was the one who suggested this engagement. Chu Zihan made a shocking announcement. The what? Bai Zihan couldn't help but be stunned. She was the one who suggested it? How? Why? His mind reeled, unable to process what he had just heard. Looking at Chu Zihan's face, Bai Zihan was sure she wasn't joking. He wanted to yell, shout, and demand to know what the hell's wrong with her. But he knew that would only make things worse. So, he forced himself to calm down, realizing that losing his composure wouldn't change anything. Why? Bai Zihan couldn't help but ask. I am the worst person to marry. Although I am the heir to the Bai clan, with my lack of talent, there's no way I can keep this position. Bai Zihan continued, perhaps driven by a genuine curiosity about why she chose him. Or maybe in a last attempt to convince her that she had made a mistake. My personality isn't the best, and although my appearance is decent, I don't think you're particularly attracted to it either. Lady Chu, why would you want to marry me? 1. Chapter 22 At a marriage of convenience, Bai Zihan asked seriously. This had now shifted from both of them simply being in the same unfortunate position to Chu Zihan being the one responsible for putting him in it. There was a momentary silence as Chu Zian looked outside, then back at Bai Zihan. Everyone praises me for my talent and beauty. Countless marriage proposals are sent to the Chu clan every year, she said, her voice calm yet carrying an underlying weight. But in the end I'm still just a girl. Bai Zihan blinked in confusion. Chu Zian leaned back, resting her chin on her hand. No matter how strong I am, how talented, how accomplished, my clan still wants to marry me off to a powerful family. That's just how things work. She sighed, twirling the teacup in her fingers. I didn't want to leave my fate in the hands of some unknown man. Someone chosen by my clan for the sake of alliances or benefits. So, instead of waiting to be married off to a stranger, I made my own choice. She looked at Bai Zihan and smirked. I chose you. Bai Zihan felt a chill run down his spine. Beat, but why me? He couldn't understand. Of all people, why would she willingly choose him? Chu Zian chuckled. Of course, my clan wasn't exactly thrilled when I suggested marrying you. Bai Zihan, the infamous good-for-nothing young master of the Bai clan. She gave him a teasing look. They thought I was joking. Bai Zihan clenched his fists. Ha, even they look down on me. Well, they're not wrong. It was one thing for him to insult himself, but another to hear it coming from someone else. But the Bai clan is still a powerful family, one my clan wants to befriend. And since I insisted, they eventually agreed. Bai Zihan's lips twitched. Goddammit, elders, please work harder. Can you really give away your princess to a villain like me? Bai Zihan thought. Chu Zian tilted her head, looking amused. No, as for why I want to marry you specifically. She leaned in slightly, her red eyes gleaming with mischief. The first reason is simple. I want to become Bai Shuking's sister. Bai Zihan choked on his own breath. What kind of reason is that? She's my close friend and almost like a sister. Chu Zian mused. Wouldn't it be fun to be an actual part of her family? To have that connection. Bai Zihan stared at her in disbelief. The second reason. Chu Zian continued, ignoring his shocked expression. Is that you're easy to conquer. I mean that you're quite obedient. Bai Zihan's body stiffened. I mean, look at you. She gestured at him playfully. You wouldn't dare do anything to me unless I allowed it, right? Her smirk deepened. If I want the freedom I've always desired, a little sacrifice is inevitable. Marrying you gives me almost all of it. So why not? And she smiled at him like a cat playing with its prey. Indeed, the main reason was that Bai Zihan was someone who feared the strong and oppressed the weak. He was also lazy and lacked ambition. While such traits were typically looked down upon, they were exactly what Chu Zian wanted. As the stronger person, she knew that Bai Zihan would never dare to challenge or demand anything from her. Moreover, unlike other suitors, she had never been ogled by Bai Zihan, whether because he was used to beauties or simply didn't find her type appealing. Either way, she felt that by marrying Bai Zihan, her clan would secure the desired marriage alliance, while she would finally be free from the burden of marriage. As for what Bai Zihan felt, well, she didn't particularly care. With you I lose nothing. Bai Zihan felt his soul leave his body. This woman. He finally realized that she had thought this through thoroughly and wanted to marry him. Not out of love, but because he was an easy target. His lips trembled as he tried to find a way to counter this insanity. But what if I refuse? What if I? You won't. Chu Zian cut him off smoothly, her confidence unwavering. You don't have the option. Uncle Bai would surely not let you. She sipped her tea, completely at ease. Bai Zihan opened his mouth, then closed it. She was absolutely right. His entire plan to escape this engagement had been crushed before it even started. Father must have known. No wonder he was confident and didn't object to me meeting with Chu Zian before the engagement was announced. Chu Zian placed her cup down and smiled. Now then, let's talk about when our engagement is going to be announced. Bai Zihan wanted to cry. I've been trapped. But isn't there a better option? Like what about Bai Zihan? Bai Zihan suggested, refusing to give up just yet. Although he was aware that doing so would ultimately mean losing his position as heir, that was a small sacrifice he was willing to make. Chu Zian shook her head. You know I can't. Doing so would be equivalent to becoming Shuking's enemy. Chu Zian explained. She was well aware of the political situation within the Bai clan, and how the branch family was trying to replace the current head of the clan. Her marrying someone other than Bai Zihan would be the same as supporting them, and she knew it could cause a rift between her and Bai Shuking. Moreover, that person is quite controlling and dominant. He seems hard to manipulate. That should be her real reason. Bai Zihan thought. In the end, Chu Zian simply wanted someone weak and easy enough that she could continue to do whatever she pleased without being ordered around. And he was the perfect candidate. Bai Zihan scratched his head, trying to come up with an idea to change Chu Zian's mind and escape this engagement. Actually, this is also good for you too. Chu Zian suddenly said. Bai Zihan turned to her, his expression clearly asking how in the world this could possibly be good for him. Do you have someone you like? Chu Zian asked. Bai Zihan shook his head. Then there's no problem being engaged to me. That's the problem, Bai Zihan thought, though he didn't say it out loud. You won't interfere in my business, and I won't interfere in yours. Chu Zian stated. But Bai Zihan still had a sullen face. Even if he wasn't engaged to her, he had all the freedom in the world. Seeing his expression, Chu Ziyan added another vantage. How about this, in the future, even if you find someone you love, I wouldn't mind if you kept her as mistress. Chu Ziyan said. Unbelievable. Bai Zihan muttered. It wasn't just her words that were unbelievable, but the sheer lengths she was willing to go to. Chapter 23 Tui 30 Battle for Chu Ziyan. Bai Zihan had no choice but to relent after numerous attempts to cancel the engagement proved futile. Hafe. When I get stronger, she'll realize what a big mistake she's made. Bai Zihan fumed and muttered angrily. Of course, this was just a way for him to console himself after his plan had failed miserably. If only there was someone who could help me. But unbeknownst to him, many of his enemies were already plotting to make his goal a reality, including the elders of the Bai clan, who wished to dethrone Bai Zihan as heir. They knew that with the Chu clan involved, removing Bai Zihan as heir would become nearly impossible, at least as long as he was announced as Chu Ziyan's fiancé. However, they weren't about to let that happen so easily. Afai, you know what is happening in the clan, right? Bai Feng asked. Bai Zihan nodded. Of course he knew. He was furious. Not only had Bai Zihan's position as heir been solidified, but he had also gained Chu Ziyan as his fiancé. Chu Ziyan had arrived at the Bai clan, and in 3 days, the engagement would be officially announced, making it known throughout the entire empire. Don't worry, you still have a chance? Bai Feng said with a smile. What? Bai Zihan asked in confusion. He had assumed his father's plan had been crushed and that there was no way to change Bai Zihan's position as heir. Haha, Bai Zihan, marrying Chu Ziyan. How could that be possible? Chu Ziyan must surely detest the idea. Bai Jian's eyes narrowed at his father's words. You mean? Bai Feng smirked, his eyes gleaming with cunning. The other elders must have realized this as well. It's obvious, whoever wins Chu Ziyan's heart before the engagement is officially announced will also secure the position of heir. Bai Jian clenched his fists. It made perfect sense. If Chu Ziyan herself rejected Bai Zihan, then the engagement would fall apart. And without the backing of the Chu clan, Bai Zihan's position as heir would become vulnerable once more. But they also knew that while the marriage with Chu Ziyan was necessary for the Bai clan, the groom needed to be replaced, everything else would remain unchanged. Bai Feng leaned closer, lowering his voice. I don't know why Bai Tianheng claimed that Chu Ziyan wants Bai Zihan, but it's clearly a scheme. However, what if she finds a better option? Someone stronger, more capable, someone truly worthy of standing by her side. Bai Feng continued with excitement. If she falls in love with someone else and chooses to cancel the engagement with Bai Zihan, it would be entirely possible. And no one, not even the clan leader, would interfere. No matter what, Bai Feng believed that as long as Bai Jian could change Chu Ziyan's mind or seduce her into canceling the engagement and choosing someone else, there would be no problem. Even Bai Tianheng wouldn't object, otherwise that will be going against the interest of the clan. Among your peers, you're the most promising candidate. Even the elders acknowledge your talent. If you manage to win her over, then. Bai Jian felt his heart pound. Indeed, among the younger generation he was the most talented and the one most deserving of Chu Ziyan. The heir's position is as good as mine. Bai Jian finished, his eyes flickering with ambition. That's right. Bai Feng nodded. No matter what, before the engagement is officially announced, you must make Chu Ziyan yours. Bai Jian took a deep breath. Chu Ziyan, he had always admired her. Her talent, her beauty, her reputation as one of the most extraordinary geniuses of their generation. And yet, she was about to be wasted on Bai Zihan, that useless fool. Bai Jian's lips curled into a determined smile. She'll realize soon enough who the better man is. Bai Feng patted his son's shoulder. Good, Chu Ziyan will be staying at the Bai clan manor for the time being. Use this chance well. No matter what, you must make her change her mind. Bai Jian nodded. No matter what, he would not let Bai Zihan win this time. Such schemes were not exclusive to Bai Feng. Other elders were also giving similar instructions to their sons. Although they supported Bai Tianheng and were willing to help Bai Jian become heir, that didn't mean they had no other candidates in mind. Especially their own children. Bai Jian was indeed the most talented, but even if their sons were less capable, as long as one of them could win Chu Ziyan's heart, they knew they would have a chance at the heir's position. Meanwhile, Bai Zihan remained completely unaware of the brewing conspiracies. Still dejected over his failed attempts to cancel the engagement, he hadn't realized just how many eyes were now on Chu Ziyan. However, that didn't mean he intended to stay in this state for long. He was too weak. He knew that if the engagement proceeded, he would have no choice but to grow stronger. Knowing Chu Ziyan, he had to be prepared. Not just to resist her dominance in the future but also for the possibility that an admirer of hers might one day rise up to challenge him. After all, wasn't this the typical cliché scenario? A powerful young genius is forced into an engagement with someone they don't love due to family politics, only for their true love to train desperately, gain recognition from the girl's family, and eventually defeat their unwanted fiancé in a grand battle. Even though Chu Ziyan had refused to cancel the engagement, meaning she likely had no lover, Bai Zihan knew his own situation well enough to recognize that he could easily end up playing the villain in a similar story. Even if that wasn't the case, There were plenty of admirers of Chu Ziyan, and there might be some who could try to kill him, believing he had forced the marriage upon her. This was another reason why he hadn't wanted this engagement in the first place. Whatever. In the end, it all boiled down to one thing: he was too weak. If he were stronger, none of this would be a problem, even if he did marry Chu Ziyan. And for that, the most important step lay ahead: cultivating the primordial chaos body refinement technique. Chapter 24 Cultivating Primordial Chaos Body Refinement Technique. Bai Zihan had already ordered his servants to gather the necessary ingredients for cultivating the primordial chaos body refinement technique. The materials required were incredibly rare and precious, each one a treasure that would make even powerful cultivators envious. Like grade 3 dragon blood marrow, extracted from the bones of dragon-type beasts. It could vastly strengthen one's physical body, making it tougher than steel. Grade 4 netherfire essence. A flame-infused mineral capable of tempering the body's meridians, increasing their resilience and energy flow. Grade 4 void spirit grass. A mystical herb that enhances bodily endurance and allows one to recover from injuries at an astonishing rate. And there were almost 20 other ingredients, all of which were above grade 2. Each of these materials was exceedingly difficult to obtain, but Bai Zihan had the backing of the Bai clan. Within the Bai clan, all the required ingredients were available. Of course, that didn't mean he could simply take whatever he wanted, since they didn't belong to him. As the heir, Bai Zihan has many privileges, but he wasn't allowed to squander the clan's resources without justification, especially the grade 3 and above ingredients. However, he had already anticipated this hurdle and obtained permission from his father. As for how he convinced his father, when he approached his father, Bai Tianheng, with the request, he emphasized that it was solely for his training, and also promised that he would not sabotage the engagement. Of course, sabotaging the engagement seemed difficult, so he didn't want to. Not that he wouldn't if he could. But his father didn't know that, and he wanted to take advantage of that. Given Bai Zihan's past behavior, Bai Tianheng was obviously worried that his son would do something reckless. With that promise, Bai Tianheng could be less worried about Bai Zihan interfering in the engagement. Though if he did, his father's belt was waiting for his ass. Moreover, upon hearing that it was for training, Bai Tianheng was more than pleased. And although those ingredients were precious to Bai Tianheng, they weren't worth as much as Bai Zihan's future. Of course, Bai Tianheng assumed that Bai Zihan would ask the clan alchemist to refine a pill or something. He had no idea that Bai Zihan was going to directly use these ingredients for body refinement. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed so easily, knowing just how potent those grade 4 and grade 3 ingredients were when directly consumed or refined. Anyway, Bai Zihan had no problem with collecting the ingredient for his body refinement, unlike the protagonist who probably would have to search far and wide to obtain it. With these resources in hand, Bai Zihan was ready to cultivate the primordial chaos body refinement technique. However, Bai Zihan knew that the process wouldn't be easy. There was a chance that he could die if he couldn't endure the pain. And it would be a gruesome death. But he was ready, at least he thought he was. He was going to cultivate in isolation, and instructed the servants not to disturb him or allow anyone else to interfere. Until he came out, nobody was allowed to interrupt his training. Bai Zihan took a deep breath as he stepped into his personal training chamber. The room was reinforced with formations to suppress energy fluctuations, ensuring that no one would sense what he was about to do. The ingredients had already been delivered, each one glowing with an aura of power. The lower, grade ingredients emitted faint energies, while the higher, grade ones radiated overwhelming pressure. The first step was to take the grade 2 ironwood root, a tempering material that strengthened bones. Let's start. He swallowed the ironwood root. The moment it entered his body, a dull pressure spread through his skeleton, like a slow, rhythmic pounding deep within. His bones vibrated, reinforcing themselves under the root's essence. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. Silently, he endured. Next came the grade 2 thunderleaf vine, a plant known for stimulating the nervous system, making the body more responsive. The moment he absorbed its essence, a sharp tingling sensation ran through his body, his nerves twitching involuntarily. His muscles stiffened, the sensation spreading like countless needles pricking beneath his skin. His fingers trembled slightly, but he took deep breaths, keeping himself steady. Still, he did not make a sound. Then came the grade 3 bloodstone extract, which stimulated blood regeneration and increased vitality. The moment the extract merged with his body, his heart pounded violently. A torrent of energy burst through his veins, surging like a raging flood. His blood felt like it was boiling, his skin turned bright red, and his organs threatened to rupture from the overwhelming force. His breathing became ragged. He clenched his jaw, but a low groan escaped his lips. I can't. No, I have to endure. The excruciating pain nearly shattered his mind, but Bai Zihan forced himself to stabilize it. With each new herb that he consumed, the pain multiplied, but there was no going back. If he stopped, then death was the only outcome awaiting him. His only path to survival was to continue and endure until the end. Minutes passed. With each refined ingredient, his body experienced pain unlike anything before, so excruciating that he wished for death instead. However, Bai Zihan still persisted. He knew that this pain was only temporary, something he had to endure. Otherwise, given his circumstances, death could claim him at any moment. Let's continue. Now, it was time for the grade 3 dragon blood marrow. He swallowed the thick liquid and instantly, a powerful surge of vitality spread through his veins. Epesh. His bones cracked and reshaped, his muscles twisted violently, and his skin split open, revealing raw flesh underneath. Arjek. His veins bulged as red-hot energy stormed through his body, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. It felt like he was being ripped apart and reforged at the same time. He gasped, black spots dancing at the edges of his vision. His body trembled uncontrollably, but he bit his lip hard enough to draw blood, refusing to pass out. With so many herbs already in his system, it was a miracle that his body hadn't exploded, but he still had to endure the overwhelming power they unleashed. Just as he barely stabilized the dragon blood marrow, he proceeded with the grade 4 netherfire essence. The instant it fused with his meridians, it felt as though his entire body had been set ablaze. GL! Bai Zihan let out a blood-curdling scream as hellish flames scorched his internal organs. His meridians strained, expanded, then burned as the energy coursed through him. His skin was charred and cracked, and his bones radiated searing heat. Bai Zihan thrashed violently, every fiber of his being engulfed in endless torment. This was hell, perhaps even worse than hell itself. So why am I suffering like this? Doubt crept into his mind. No reason seemed sufficient to justify the torment he was enduring. It felt meaningless, unbearable. Wouldn't it be easier to simply give up and let death take him? Wouldn't that be a relief? But he wouldn't. He couldn't. No matter how agonizing it was, surrender was not an option. I am Bai Zihan, someone who will rise to trample over everyone. I refuse to give up. Bai Zihan might have been a coward, but he was never one to give up easily. As long as even the faintest glimmer of hope remained, he would cling to it with everything he had. Although his body screamed in pain, he took the final step, grade 4 void spirit grass. An icy surge followed the fire, sending a chilling force through his burning body. It felt as though his body was being torn apart and rebuilt, only to be shattered again in an endless cycle of torment. His organs quivered, his bones hardened to an unnatural degree, and his flesh continuously regenerated, each time stronger than before. Seconds. Bai Zihan had no way of knowing. Trapped in the depths of agony, time lost all meaning. He screamed. He thrashed. He endured. For what felt like an eternity, his body and mind were pushed to the brink, until at last, something changed. The unbearable pain began to fade. The suffocating pressure gradually subsided. His shattered body mended itself, his skin toughening, his muscles reforging into something far beyond human. With a shaky breath, Bai Zihan slowly opened his eyes. Did I survive? Chapter 25 25 Rebirth. Through pain, Bai Zihan slowly opened his eyes, his vision unfocused as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. His body still ached, though the unbearable agony had finally faded. For a long moment, he simply lay there, staring at the ceiling, his mind sluggishly piecing together his experience. He had survived. Barely. His breath came in ragged gasp, his chest rising and falling heavily as he tried to steady himself. The pain was beyond anything he had ever imagined, so unbearable that only a madman would willingly go through it a second time. And yet, despite everything, he knew, this was only the beginning. The primordial chaos body refinement technique wasn't a one-time process. He would have to undergo this torment again, and again, and again. The thought alone made him shudder. I really don't want to do that a second time, he muttered hoarsely. But he had no choice. If he wanted strength, to stand above everyone, he had to endure. And if he could do it once, then he could do it twice. With a deep breath, Bai Zihan pushed those thoughts aside and focused on his body. Before cultivating the technique, the sheer brutality of it made it seem like it would leave him crippled, his meridians shattered, and his foundation ruined. Yet now that he had cultivated the primordial chaos body refinement technique, he found no lingering side effects. In fact, he felt stronger. Much stronger. He clenched his fist, feeling a surge of raw power coursing through his veins. His muscles felt denser, his bones tougher, his very flesh seemingly more refined. It was as if his body had been reforged from the inside out, every part of him now stronger than before. It seems like the suffering was perhaps worth it. The pain he had endured wasn't something just anyone could withstand, even knowing that it would make them stronger. Although he felt a newfound strength, he wasn't entirely sure if it justified what he had gone through. He needs to test that out before drawing a conclusion. It also seemed like he had also broken through to the late stage of core formation. System. Show me my status. Host info, host Beifo, Zihan, age 16, cultivation realm core formation late A constitution none, martial arts 9 shadows flowing light sword, minor mastery. Well. Considering all those high-grade ingredients that he consumed, it was no wonder that he has broken through a minor realm. It was an unexpected gain but a welcome one. Regardless, the primary increase in his strength wasn't his cultivation but his body. And he wanted to know just how much stronger he had become. Curious, he slowly stood up, stretching his limbs and rolling his shoulders. His movements felt smoother, lighter. as if his body had been unshackled from invisible restraints he hadn't even known were there. Flexing his fingers, he clenched and unclenched his hand. The subtle shifts in his muscles, the way his tendons pulled. Everything felt different. Testing further, he took a step forward, only to nearly stumble as he moved faster than expected. His speed had increased, his control over his own body had changed. A smirk tugged at his lips. This isn't bad. Bai Zihan's smirk deepened as he flexed his fingers, a surge of excitement replacing the exhaustion that still lingered in his body. He had endured unimaginable agony. But now it was time to see if the suffering had truly been worth it. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath, feeling the flow of energy within his body. His blood coursed like a raging river, his muscles coiled like steel cables, and his bones radiated an unshakable sturdiness. Then, he moved. The moment his foot pushed off the ground, the stone beneath him cracked, spider web, like fissures spreading out. His body blurred, reappearing on the other side of the chamber almost instantly. Bai Zihan blinked in mild astonishment. He hadn't expected that. His speed had tripled, no, possibly even more. This wasn't just fast, this was explosive. He clenched his fist and thrust it forward. Boom! The air in front of him rippled violently, a compressed shockwave blasting out, shaking the chamber walls. Walls that had been strengthened by formations 3 times or perhaps 4 times stronger. That was his initial estimation. His physical strength had increased at least threefold, maybe more. If this was the result of just the first session, he could only imagine how terrifying his power would become after fully attaining the first form of the primordial chaos body. Perhaps then, no one in the desolate Heaven Empire would be able to kill him. Of course, that was still a distant goal. He would need to collect even rarer ingredients and withstand even greater pain to refine his body further through the primordial chaos body refinement technique. Still, his current body was already vastly superior to most. Something that others might not be able to achieve even after years of hard work. His current physical strength. Was it already superior to a core condensation cultivator? That didn't necessarily mean he could defeat a core condensation cultivator. But if they only compared raw physical ability, Bai Zihan wasn't sure if any of them could overpower him now. A chuckle escaped his lips. This is good. Although he might not yet be able to win against those in the core condensation realm and beyond, he could at least survive if he fought one. His survivability had drastically increased with this. And yet, he wasn't done testing. If his strength had increased this much, what about his defense? Bai Zihan lifted his hand, his fingers tightening into a fist. He hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath. He punched himself in the chest. A dull thud echoed in the chamber, but that was it. Bai Zihan frowned, looking down. He had felt the impact, but it didn't hurt. The power he used was 50% of what he could muster, but with the increased strength, it was enough to knock out anyone in the core formation stage. Let's increase the power. This time, he focused, drawing on his full power, which is enough to even seriously hurt core condensation cultivator. Boom! His fist slammed into his torso, sending a powerful shockwave outward. The air trembled, the chamber walls quaked slightly. And yet, although he felt a slight ache where he had struck himself, it was so insignificant that even 10 such attacks wouldn't make a difference. Even he was momentarily stunned. His body had already surpassed the level of ordinary body refinement cultivators. No, it was beyond that. His defense was so high that most physical attacks would be useless against him. Even powerful techniques might struggle to break his body now. Although he hadn't yet achieved the first form of the primordial chaos body, the ability to absorb all types of energy. Even without that, his physical resilience was superior to those with powerful constitutions. Bai Zihan took a deep breath, his smirk returning. Perhaps this body is already comparable to those of the Golden Core Realm cultivator. Chapter 26 No Way Out. Bai Zihan stepped out after testing his newfound strength. Only a day had passed since he had gone into seclusion to refine his body, yet it seemed like major events had unfolded in the Bai clan during his absence. Preparations were in full swing for his engagement with Chu Ziyan. However, that wasn't the biggest surprise awaiting him. The moment he emerged, Luo Qing approached him in a hurry, an anxious look on her face. "Young master," she called out urgently. Bai Zihan glanced at her, wondering why she was in such a hurry. "What happened?" "Lady Bai Shuking has been looking for you. She wanted to talk with the young master and instructed me to inform you as soon as possible," Lu Qing said. "The what? What did I do now?" Bai Zihan was immediately alerted when Luo Qing mentioned that his sister was looking for him. Bai Shuking only looked for him when he caused trouble. Whenever she did, he knew he was in some kind of predicament, just like the time with the Heaven Sword sect disciples. "Did she say why?" Bai Zihan asked. "Lady Bai Shuking hasn't told me her reason and just instructed me to inform the young master," Lu Qing replied nervously. She seemed to have some idea about what it might be but didn't dare to speculate on Bai Shuking's thoughts or intentions. Bai Zihan also didn't press for details. If Bai Shuking had something important to say, he would find out soon enough. Without wasting any more time, he made his way toward his sister's residence. "Kale, Nauk, who is it?" A cold voice came from the room. It obviously belonged to Bai Shuking. "It's me, sister," Bai Zihan answered. "Come in." Bai Zihan immediately entered the room and saw his sister sitting on her chair. She glanced at him, her sharp gaze assessing him. There was something different about Bai Zihan, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. She didn't dwell on it either. Sister, why did you call for me? Bai Zihan asked immediately, not wanting to waste time. I won't waste words with you. First, your engagement with Chu Ziyan has been finalized. This is good for you. Bai Zihan remained silent, though he wanted to complain. How is this good for him? However, complaining will no results. Instead, she might question why he was complaining when he was getting more than he deserved, just like their father. He was well aware that Bai Shuking cared more about Chu Ziyan than him. Even if he was dissatisfied, she wouldn't necessarily care. Perhaps if it were the other way around and Chu Ziyan wanted to break off the engagement, Bai Shuking would have supported that decision. I don't need to tell you what will happen if you don't treat her well. Bai Shuking warned. Knowing Bai Zihan's past behavior, she was well aware that the chances of him causing trouble were high. Mistreating Chu Ziyan was also a possibility, perhaps by seeking a mistress or some other nonsense. So, Bai Shuking was warning him not to pull any of that and to treat her well. Though, with Chu Ziyan's cultivation compared to Bai Zihan's, she didn't even need to get involved. If Bai Zihan dared to mistreat her, Chu Ziyan could deal with him herself. Still, as Chu Ziyan's good friend, Bai Shuking thought she had a responsibility to make sure her brother became a suitable husband. More importantly, this engagement secures your status as the Bai clan's heir. Bai Shuking stated, ensuring that Bai Zihan understood the benefits. But don't let that make you complacent, you're still far from being worthy of her. Hearing that, Bai Zihan's expression remained unreadable. The who wants to be worthy of her? I am indeed unworthy. Please cancel the engagement. Bai Zihan cursed inwardly. Work hard. Bai Shuking continued. If you want to stand beside her, you need to prove yourself. The Bai Zihan couldn't help but want to complain that he didn't want to stand beside her. Nor did he want to prove anything. The why is my engagement successful when I have trashy talent, while the protagonist's engagement gets cancelled for the same reason? Bai Zihan couldn't help but realize how opposite his life was compared to the protagonist's. Perhaps my sister's ex-fiancé is relieved to have had his engagement cancelled, Bai Zihan began to suspect. If he had to be engaged to someone as fierce as Bai Shuking, he would be overjoyed to have it cancelled. Of course, he could only think this way because, even if his engagement was broken, it wouldn't affect him or the Bai clan too much. It was different for Bai Shuking's ex-fiancé. Bai Zihan knew that he would definitely return for revenge. Bai Shuking let her words settle before delivering the next piece of news. Secondly, you have been admitted to the Heaven Sword sect. Bai Zihan's eyes narrowed slightly. So what? That's impossible. To be admitted into the Heaven Sword sect, one had to meet strict requirements, such as reaching the core condensation realm before the age of 15. As a 15-year-old who was only in the core formation stage, Bai Zihan didn't meet any of the requirements. He lacked both cultivation talent and hard work. Two things the Heaven Sword sect valued. Make good use of this opportunity, Bai Shuking said. Wait, what? Bai Zihan interrupted his sister. Despite initially planning to just listen and get it over with. But this unexpected news left him questioning her. Just what kind of medicine had the Heaven Sword sect taken to suddenly accept him as a disciple? Sister, what do you mean that I have been admitted to the Heaven Sword sect? Bai Zihan asked. He knew that, with his talent and personality, there was no way the Heaven Sword sect would accept him. It is what it is. After this engagement with Zihan, you are coming with us to the Heaven Sword sect. I hope you behave yourself there. Otherwise, even father won't be able to protect you from punishment. Bai Shuking said. How is this possible? I don't meet any of the Heaven Sword sect's requirements. Bai Zihan protested. Hif. They made an exception because they know you have a Dao bone. Bai Shuking replied, looking disgusted. She knew how Bai Zihan had obtained it, and in her opinion, it was utterly disgraceful. Of course, outsiders didn't know that. Only a few high-ranking members of the Bai clan were aware. More importantly, being Chu Ziyan's fiancé helped. The elders of the Heaven Sword sect are already aware of the engagement and accepted their father's request for the two of you to be together. Of course, that wasn't all. Bai Tianheng must have sent plenty of bribes to the Heaven Sword sect as well. Additionally, being Bai Shuking's brother helped, but she wouldn't admit that. But, Zihan didn't know how to respond. It seemed like ever since he learned about his engagement to Chu Ziyan, everything had gone downhill for him. Of course, he wouldn't admit that most of it was due to his own behavior. His father was only making decisions he believed were best for his son. And lastly, I called you here for this reason. What? There's more. Bai Zihan groaned internally. He had already heard enough shocking news. Ziyan is being approached by other Bai clan boys. It seems the elders are making their moves. Bai Shuking said. Oh, hearing this, instead of getting angry, Bai Zihan felt a glimmer of hope. He hadn't expected to have allies within the Bai clan. Though of course, he understood their intentions. But as long as they succeeded, he would be free from this engagement. You need to stop them. Bai Shuking ordered. Huh? Why? Bai Zihan asked. Why? You're her fiancé. What? You don't want to? Bai Shuking glared coldly at him. It looked like a long lecture was incoming if he said no. Of course, I will as you say. Bai Zihan quickly agreed, knowing better than to argue with his sister. That's all. You may leave. Chapter 27-27, The Pestering of Bai Jian. Chu Zian stood in the Bai clan's garden, surrounded by ancient pavilions and a small artificial lake. The fragrance of blooming spirit lotuses drifted in the air, but her mood was anything but peaceful. It could have been the most peaceful place in the world, but that serenity was shattered by the presence of multiple individuals. Primarily the Bai clan's male geniuses and their attendants, all flocking around Chu Zian. Ever since the talk with Bai Zihan, she had been approached by Dai clan geniuses. Most of them were subtle in their intentions, expressing polite admiration, dropping hints about their own strengths, and trying to cancel her engagement with Bai Zihan. However, one person among them was neither subtle nor polite. Bai Jian. The undisputed most talented male of the younger Bai generation, Bai Jian was tall, handsome, and possessed an innate arrogance that came with knowing he was superior to almost everyone his age. Having already reached the golden core stage at just 17, he was considered one of the Bai clan's future pillars. Unlike the others who were merely probing, Bai Jian made his intentions clear. Miss Chu, you deserve better, Bai Jian stated. His voice carried confidence, as if he were merely stating a fact. Chu Zian arched an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. She had been dealing with this since yesterday, with them trying their best to persuade her to cancel the engagement with Bai Zihan. And you believe that better choice is you? Chu Zian asked, her tone indifferent. Of course. Bai Jian replied without hesitation. Everyone knows Bai Zihan is a disgrace to the Bai clan. A lazy, arrogant fool who has squandered all his opportunities. He has nothing, no talent, no discipline, no future. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you think someone like him can protect you? Can he stand by your side? If anything, he will be the greatest burden of your life. Chu Zian wasn't too interested in what Bai Jian had to say, as she was already well aware of that. Perhaps that is precisely why she felt much more relieved to marry Bai Zihan than someone like Bai Yan. Bai Jian smirked. I can be your true partner. One who is worthy of standing beside you. You and I are alike, both blessed with talent, both destined for greatness. Bai Zihan is nothing but an obstacle. If you refuse this engagement and choose me instead, not only will you gain a powerful ally, but the Bai clan elders will also support the decision. Everyone wants you to be with someone who matches your worth. Bai Jian continued babbling about his greatness and how he was the only one worthy of Chu Zian while Bai Zihan wasn't. It might be somewhat true, as Bai Jian was a rare genius. And apart from Bai Shuking, he could be said to be the greatest talent of his generation within the Bai clan. However, to Chu Zian, it was worthless. After all, while talent like Bai Jian's was rare, it wasn't exactly difficult to find. Especially in the Heaven Sword sect, where geniuses gathered. Moreover, compared to her own talent, Bai Jian was nothing noteworthy. She had already reached the nascent soul realm at 17. Young Master Bai. Chu Zian finally said. I will keep what you said a secret, but you are not allowed to insult my future husband. Refrain from saying that again and leave. She wasn't too concerned about Bai Jian insulting Bai Zihan, but wanted to use that as an excuse to chase away the nuisance. Bai Jian frowned. He hadn't expected to be rejected like this and refused to accept it. How could he, the genius of the Bai clan, be rejected while Bai Zihan, a mere waste, was accepted by someone like Chu Zian? Miss Chu Zian, please stop joking. Future husband, you don't seriously consider marrying that waste, do you? Bai Jian scoffed. Miss Chu Zian, you might not know, but Bai Zihan can only keep his position because of his engagement with you. As long as you agree to cancel the engagement with him and engage with me, the result will be the same. The Chu clan and Bai clan will still be united through our marriage. Bai Jian explained. Like all the others, he believed that the only reason Chu Zian had accepted the engagement with Bai Zihan was because the Chu clan sought a marriage alliance with the Bai clan. I don't need to? She replied. My engagement is already decided. Bai Jian's expression darkened, but he quickly masked his irritation with a smile. I see. You're bound by duty, he said smoothly, taking another step forward. But duty is not absolute. A marriage between two people should be based on compatibility, strength, and mutual respect. You and Bai Zihan have none of that. He reached out, as if to take her hand, but Chu Zian shifted slightly, evading his touch without making it obvious. Bai Jian's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Perhaps frustration, perhaps amusement. If you're worried about the Chu clan's interests, rest assured. The Bai clan elders will not only approve but will actively support our engagement. It seems like no matter what she says, Bai Jian will refuse to believe that Chu Zian would want to marry Bai Zihan. His persistence was beginning to grate on her nerves. She didn't show it, of course. Her face remained calm, her posture relaxed, but an unmistakable coldness seeped into her gaze. How troublesome. If Bai Jian only crossed the line, she could teach him a lesson like she had done with Bai Zihan. But she couldn't. Bai Jian was just pestering her. No good reason to beat him up. Where the hell is Bai Zihan? Shouldn't it be his responsibility to protect me from such problems? Chu Zian began to get angry as she remembered Bai Zihan, who had seemed to disappear after that conversation with her. If he were present, he could at least deter these people from casually approaching her. With his reputation as a bully, and someone who doesn't care about the rules, he was the kind of person other members of the Bai clan didn't want to deal with. Is he intentionally avoiding me? Chu Ziyan thought. After all, she knew Bai Zihan didn't want to be engaged to her. It would make sense that Bai Zihan wouldn't interfere with Bai Jian and the others if they were doing something he desired. He might even encourage these Bai clan members to pester her more, in order to cancel the engagement. Just thinking about that, Chu Ziyan's anger grew. Not only because she, someone admired by many, was willingly getting engaged to him, but he also dared to think of her as some kind of burden. Many boys would be willing to do anything to marry someone as beautiful as her, and she had thought Bai Zihan would be no different. Who would have thought that he was actually planning to cancel the engagement, rather than begging her to stay? Bai Jian continued to pester her, relentlessly trying to convince Chu Ziyan to dissolve the engagement. Chu Ziyan grew increasingly annoyed and thought that maybe it was time to take more drastic action to make them stop bothering her. Just then, a voice echoed in the Bai clan's garden. What the hell are you all doing here? It was Bai Zihan's voice. Chapter 28-288 Shadows of the Past. Hearing Bai Zihan's voice, everyone turned toward the source. Bai Zihan stood at the entrance of the garden, his expression twisted in irritation. While others might see this as him being angry due to these Bai clan members approaching his fiancée, in reality, he was angry because he, Bai Zihan, had to come here to help Chu Ziyan. His presence, while not particularly domineering, carried a certain arrogance, though those who knew him understood it was just his usual attitude. Chu Ziyan glanced at him, her expression unreadable. So he finally decided to show up, huh? Chu Ziyan was certain that Bai Zihan wouldn't show up at all. Yet he did, which added some points in her opinion. Although that would be until she learned that Bai Zihan was forced by his sister. Bai clan members began to flatter him at his presence, with some already fleeing the scene, wanting nothing to do with the problematic child of the Bai clan. Others were also planning to do the same. It's like he's some kind of plague. What Chu Ziyan thought when she saw many of those people who had been pestering her run away at speed of light. The people she had difficulty trying to chase away were immediately leaving at the mere presence of Bai Zihan. Although that could just show how bad a reputation and personality Bai Zihan had, at the moment, she felt good about this trait of his. Baijin, on the other hand, narrowed his eyes slightly. Zihan, I was just speaking with your fiancé. Bai Jian said with a smirk. Although he didn't like dealing with Bai Zihan most of the time, today wasn't a situation where he could easily back down. Hi. Bai Zihan sounded irritated as he looked around. And I reckon that you all are here for the same reason as well. The Bai Zihan said as he glared at them. They didn't know what to say and merely nodded in agreement. Sigh. He didn't sigh because of their answer. Rather, even with so many people gathered here, Bai Zihan knew that they had failed. Just looking at Chu Ziyan's face, Bai Zihan knew that they could never succeed in seducing her even if he gave them 3 years. She looked more like she was ready to beat them up, just as she had beaten him years ago, rather than someone who could fall in love. Useless, he thought. If so, then you should all leave. Bai Zihan directly commanded them as if he owned the Bai clan's garden. Baijin turned toward Bai Zihan with a composed smile. Ah Zihan. No need to be so aggressive. Bai Jian said smoothly. We were merely having a friendly conversation. After all, Miss Chu is going to be part of our Bai clan. Isn't it only natural for us to get to know her better? Some of the other Bai clan geniuses nodded in agreement, feigning innocence. Cut the bullshit, Jan. Bai Zihan said coldly. I know exactly what you're all thinking. A brief silence fell over the group. Bai Zihan let out a low chuckle. I don't care what fantasies you have. But let me give you a piece of advice. Leave it alone while I'm still being nice. Bai Zihan didn't want to deal with them anymore. And if he didn't help Chu Ziyan, while they were still harassing Chu Ziyan, then he knew that he would be called again by Bai Shuking. Since that was the case, and these useless fools weren't going to succeed anyway, he wanted them to give up right then and there to avoid wasting his time. What? Still not? Zihan asked, now visibly annoyed by the lack of obedience from these people. One should know that he, Bai Zihan, was always domineering in the Bai clan, and no matter how strong one was, they had to listen to him. Just because you think my position is unstable, you want to be disobedient, Bai Zihan thought. Ha! Just because I have been behaving particularly well these days you now think that you can go against me. Lies! Everyone thought as Bai Zihan lied through his teeth about being on his best behavior. If he had truly been on his best behavior, he wouldn't have made trouble for those Heaven Sword sect disciples. Especially you, Bai Jian. I don't think you've forgotten, have you? Bai Jian's fingers curled slightly, but he kept his face calm. I have no idea what you're talking about. Bai Jian replied nervously. Oh, maybe I should remind you, Bai Zihan said, tilting his head. Don't you remember begging me to spare you? And I did, on the condition that you'd obey whatever I said. What? Have you forgotten already? The surrounding Bai clan members stiffened as they all knew what Bai Zihan was talking about. Even Chu Ziyan raised an eyebrow as she wasn't aware of such an interesting thing. Bai Jian's eyes darkened. But he kept himself composed. That was a long time ago! Bai Zihan yelled as his hand trembled. Was it? Just a little boy who got a bit stronger, and now you think you can go against me? Bai Zihan said, poking a finger against Bai Zihan's forehead. Bai Zihan's jaw tightened. Indeed, he was once just a boy who was thoroughly bullied and humiliated by Bai Zihan. Of course it wasn't just him. Perhaps almost every Bai clan member of his generation had suffered at least once at the hands of Bai Zihan. Before cultivation, Bai Zihan was much stronger than others, and talent didn't matter much because all of them couldn't cultivate. But Bai Zihan had always been the heir and, as such, wielded much more authority than others. It didn't help that he was nurtured well due to being the heir and also because of his doting mother, who spared no resources to help him since birth. They, the Bai clan's younger generation, knew that Bai Zihan was the heir and someone that they had to listen to. Therefore, Bai Zihan could do whatever he wanted to them, and during that period, they were indeed helpless against Bai Zihan. To the point that they are still scared of Bai Zihan to this day. They might be powerful, much more powerful than Bai Zihan, but their mental scars made them fear Bai Zihan, despite them insulting and backbiting him in his absence. This was especially true for Bai Zihan, who had likely suffered the most under Bai Zihan's hand. While Bai Zihan didn't always resort to violence, he treated the Bai clan members like servants, often pushing them around, and Bai Zihan, in particular, found himself blamed for things he hadn't done. Things that were actually Bai Zihan's fault. This treatment was what drove Bai Zihan to work relentlessly to escape Bai Zihan's bullying and the suffering that came with it. It was also the reason why he became obsessed with the position of heir. So that one day, Bai Zihan would understand the pain of losing everything and suffering like he did. Zihan, don't think you can threaten me like before. I'm not that same person anymore. I've changed. Bai Zihan declared, his voice firm with newfound resolve. This time, I'll overcome my trauma. In the past, he would have been too afraid, his instinct forcing him to bow down before Bai Zihan due to the scars of his previous humiliation. Even now, deep down, he knew he was stronger than he used to be, but the memories of his torment would have usually made him hesitate. But today, something had shifted. Bai Zihan felt a surge of courage he hadn't felt in years. The time had come for him to finally confront the shadows of his past and break free from the chains that Bai Zihan had once wrapped around him. Chapter 29 Consequences of Disobeying. Bai Zihan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk as he heard Bai Zihan's declaration. Oh, you've changed. Interesting, Bai Zihan, his voice dripping with amusement, as if the mere idea of Bai Zihan standing up to him was laughable. Although Bai Zihan was aware that Bai Zihan had high cultivation, and could easily defeat him in a direct battle previously, it was a different story now considering that he had cultivated the primordial chaos body. Even if that weren't the case, he didn't believe Bai Zihan could actually dare to harm him. He had 1,001 methods to make Bai Zihan submit, using all sorts of means. Of course, that wasn't necessary now that he has a powerful body. For a moment, the entire garden fell into silence, the tension thick in the air. Every Bai clan member stood still, knowing they couldn't afford to offend either of them. At the same time, many secretly hoped that the two would fight and destroy each other, giving them a chance at the heir position. With Bai Zihan and Bai Zihan around, the others had little to no hope of claiming that position for themselves. So, you plan to continue disobeying me, John? He asked, his tone sharp, as though daring Bai Zihan to answer. Bai Jian's fists clenched at his sides. His mind screamed at him to stand firm, to finally take control of his own destiny. But as the weight of Bai Zihan's gaze bore down on him, a part of him instinctively recoiled. He had been bullied by this very person for years, humiliated, broken down. It wasn't so easy to erase those memories. At first, his throat felt dry, but then, mustering all the courage he could, he said, "That's right. You, Bai Zihan, don't get to dictate what I should do." The Bai Zihan's voice was steady, but his gaze flickered briefly, uncertain. At first, Bai Zihan trembled slightly, perhaps out of fear. This was the first time he had openly opposed Bai Zihan. But the moment the words left his mouth, a sense of relief washed over him, quickly replaced by newfound confidence. That's right, there's no need to fear Bai Zihan. He's just a bully abusing his position. Beyond that, he has no real power. A Bai Zihan thought as he felt that the trauma that has been haunting him for years is finally coming to an end. Haha. Bai Zihan laughed as though finding his uncertainty amusing. Is that so? He stepped forward, closing the gap between them with casual ease, his steps light yet purposeful. As he stood face to face with Bai Zihan, Bai Zihan looked down at him, his smile widening. You know, John, he said with a gleam in his eye, I find it amusing that you think you can disobey me. But let me remind you of something very important. Before Bai Zihan could react, Bai Zihan's hand shot out, fast and firm, slapping him across the face. Slap! The sharp sound of the strike echoed in the garden, silencing even the wind. Even Chu Zian, who had been watching the entire exchange, was surprised by Bai Zihan's sudden and unexpected slap. Bai Zihan staggered slightly, the sting of the slap burning his cheek. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, he almost thought that he was dreaming or something. Bai Zihan stood tall before him, his presence overwhelming, his eyes burning with authority. Remember this, Jian, he said coldly, his eyes staring right at Bai Zhen. I am the future leader of the Bai clan, and I don't have time for disobedient fools who think they can disobey, now or in the future. Bai Zihan declared. A clear warning to Bai Zhen and also to the others present. Bai Zihan's sudden action surprised them, and at the same time, sent a shiver of fear through the crowd. It wasn't that the slap itself was particularly strong, but the sheer audacity of the act. The way Bai Zihan struck Bai Zhen without hesitation was a chilling reminder of his past behavior. Many had thought that, due to his low cultivation talent, Bai Zihan would finally lay low and avoid making enemies, especially with his position at risk. Without the protection of his hair status, continuing to offend others could very well lead to his downfall. But Bai Zihan was still the same Bai Zihan. A bully who didn't think twice before slapping even someone like Bai Zhen. Know that this slap is not only for disobeying me but also for speaking those foolish words. Bai Zihan said arrogantly. The other Bai clan members, who had been watching with bated breath, let out a collective sigh of relief. At least it was Bai Zihan who got slapped by Bai Zihan and not them. But as Bai Zihan stood there, the sting of the slap still fresh on his cheek, he couldn't believe it. He who had cultivated tirelessly and became the second strongest in the clan, had just been slapped in the face. By a so. Wast. Perhaps he could have accepted it if it had been Bai Shuking, but Bai Zhan. Although he had endured it in the past, he was a different man today. At least, that's what he wanted to believe. Bai Zihan. Bai Zhen growled angrily as he glared at Bai Zihan. Although a flicker of nervousness remained, his instincts screaming at him to submit, there was also anger and determination burning in his eyes. How dare you slap me? Do you think you can get away with this just because you're the heir? Bai Zhen snapped. You only got away with your actions in the past because you were the heir. But with your lack of talent, there's no way you can hold on to that position for long. Don't think I will still endure whatever you do like before. Bai Zhen's aura flared as he prepared to strike Bai Zihan. The gathered Bai clan members gasped. Should we stop him? Zihan is too weak. He might die if Jian attacks him with full power. Oh no, Jian is serious. He's really going to strike Zihan. Worry spread through the crowd. Although many didn't like Bai Zihan and would have loved to see him suffer, killing a fellow clan member, especially the heir, would have dire consequences. But even if they wanted to stop Bai Zhen, they were too far away, and too weak compared to him. Chu Zian also moved, intending to interfere. If Bai Zhen really struck Bai Zihan with his golden core cultivation, he could kill him. However, just as she was about to step in, she caught sight of Bai Zhen's confident smile. She halted in her tracks. Does he have some kind of trump card? Chu Zian wondered. As the heir of the Bai clan, Bai Zihan must have some life-saving artifact or another hidden trick up his sleeve. Since Bai Zihan was the one who had slapped Bai Zhen first, and Bai Zhen was merely reacting, she decided not to interfere. Just in case she ended up ruining Bai Zihan's plan. Besides, knowing Bai Zhen's reputation, she had never heard about him suffering any real setbacks. Chapter 30:30. The unveiling of power. In the moment of his anger, Bai Zhen forgot to control his strength and launched himself at Bai Zihan with full force. Only at the last second did he realize what he was doing. Oh no! Bai Zhen tried to suppress his strength, but it was already too late. His fist, containing the QI of the Golden Core realm, was heading straight for Bai Zhen, who stood there without moving an inch. Everyone watching held their breath, expecting Bai Zihan to be sent flying, perhaps even crippled on the spot. But then, a single hand rose, fingers closing around Bai Zhen's fist in an effortless grip. Bai Zihan, whom everyone had believed to be weak, had just completely stopped Bai Zhen's full-powered punch. Silence fell over the garden. The Bai clan members stared in stunned disbelief. Even Chu Zian, who had refrained from interfering due to her suspicions, felt her heart jolt. What? She knew Bai Zhen's strength better than most. He was weak. His cultivation was shallow compared to theirs, and his body was even frailer. He had never been one to train physically. And yet, he had just stopped Bai Zhen's full-force punch, despite Bai Zhen being in the Golden Core stage. It was one thing to barely withstand or survive the blow, but Bai Zihan hadn't even taken a single step back, despite being only at the core formation stage. There was a major realm difference between them. Even a core condensation realm cultivator might not have been able to stop Bai Zhen's punch. Bai Zhen, the second strongest of their generation, stood frozen, his arm trembling. His mind couldn't process what had just happened. He caught it. Just a second ago, Bai Zhen had feared that he might accidentally cripple or kill Bai Zihan. Now, he had completely forgotten about that. Overwhelmed by shock, his attack had been effortlessly stopped by Bai Zihan, of all people. No, that's impossible. Before Bai Zhen could fully register his shock, Bai Zihan's grip tightened around his fist. Is that all? Bai Zihan asked. While his expression remained unchanged, internally, he was both excited and pleased with how powerful his body had become. In that moment, he felt that all the pain he had endured was worth it. Of course, he didn't show the satisfaction on his face as he still needed to deal with Bai Zhen. Bai Zhen's pupils shrank as the reality of the situation sank in. Bai Zihan, whom he thought he could easily handle, had effortlessly blocked his attack. In the next instant, Bieng. A powerful kick struck Bai Zihan directly in the stomach. Arjeech. Bai Zihan's body lurched backward violently, his feet leaving the ground as he was sent flying. He crashed onto the stone pavement, coughing as pain exploded through his abdomen. Normally, he could have reacted in time and dodged such an attack. But he was too mentally shaken by the sheer absurdity of the situation. Of course, while Bai Zihan's kick was painful, it hadn't dealt any serious injuries. After all, Bai Zihan was still a golden core cultivator while Bai Zihan didn't use any Q. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Bai Zihan, the mighty genius of the Bai clan, had just been kicked to the ground like an insect. And the one who did it was Bai Zihan. The supposed waste? You should think twice before trying this kind of shit again. Bai Zihan said arrogantly, dusting off his robes. His blood-red eyes swept across the gathered clan members, his tone filled with lazy contempt. What? Still watching, and asked sharply. It had been quite a while since he had ordered them to leave, yet they were still here, testing his patience. Not wanting to anger Bai Zihan further, the other Bai clan members quickly obeyed and began to disperse. However, what had happened at that moment was etched into their memories. They couldn't forget the sight of Bai Zihan stopping Bai Zihan's punch. Many speculated whether Bai Zihan had relied on his own strength or used some mysterious artifact. Most believed the latter, as that was the only explanation that made sense. Of course, if they were as powerful as Chu Zihan, they would have known that Bai Zihan had used no artifact. It was purely his own power. Bai Zihan slowly stood up, now the only other Bai clan member left apart from Bai Zihan. He stared at Bai Zihan with a mix of contempt and confusion. But one thing was clear. He no longer had the courage to attack again. It would be humiliating to attack only to fail again. More than that, the confidence he had gathered to overcome his trauma and stand up to Bai Zihan had been crushed. That familiar fear, which had tormented him years ago, was creeping back into his heart. What? Want to go again? Bai Zihan asked unreservedly, his tone laced with anger. He didn't care about Bai Zihan, whether now or in the past. He was already irritated that Bai Zihan had dared to defy him, and he had mercifully spared him. Of course, in reality, this was merely Bai Zihan's arrogance speaking. To others, it could be said that this was simply his karma. His past cruelty coming back to bite him, although it didn't quite work well. It was like the devil proclaiming himself to be a saint. But regardless of perspective, one fact remained. Bai Zihan could do nothing now. To save himself from further embarrassment, especially in front of Chu Zihan, he merely glared at Bai Zihan one last time before leaving. Bai Zihan watched Bai Zihan's retreating figure, and only then did he finally turn his gaze to Chu Zihan, who was still staring at him. Her intense gaze made him shiver slightly. What? Bai Zihan asked. When did you become this strong? Chu Zihan asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Huh, can I train? Do you think that only a genius like yourself can grow stronger? Bai Zihan scoffed. He didn't think there was any need to explain his strength. After all, while his improvement was significant, it wasn't at a level that would make people too suspicious. Most would simply assume that his parents had spent valuable resources to strengthen his body using medicinal pills. Chapter 31 A Taste of Another World. Having settled everything, Bai Zihan was finally free to do what he wanted. Well, at least until his engagement. In any case, now that he was done dealing with Bai Zihan and others, he was craving something to eat. Lu Qing, asked the head chef to make me some fried chicken. Bai Zihan said. Lu Qing quickly nodded and went to inform the kitchen about Bai Zihan's request. Thanks to Bai Zihan's teachings, the chefs were now able to recreate many of the dishes he had introduced. Fried chicken. What's that? Chu Zihan, who had been lost in thought about Bai Zihan's newfound strength, was suddenly distracted by the unfamiliar words. Although she was curious about how Bai Zihan had improved so much in such a short time, she wasn't as obsessed with power as most people. Otherwise, with her talent, she could have remained in the sect, cultivating day and night, and would have achieved far more than she had now. In any case, when she heard Bai Zihan mention fried chicken, her curiosity was piqued. What kind of dish was it that the young master of the Bai clan favored? She assumed it must be some kind of fancy name for the meat of a bird-type monster or something similar. How about you come with me and try it? I'm sure you'll like it. Bai Zihan said with a grin. He was certain that someone like Chu Zihan wouldn't have eaten something like fried chicken. Sir. Chu Zihan agreed. Now that all those annoying people had been dealt with, she had nothing better to do. Lu Qing quickly returned to inform Bai Zihan that the head chef had begun preparing the dish. Master, the food will be ready soon, she said softly, keeping her head slightly lowered. Bai Zihan gave a satisfied nod. Let's go to the dining hall then. With that, he turned to Chu Zihan and gestured for her to follow. She did so without hesitation, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. Lu Qing trailed behind them, as always, maintaining a quiet presence. The dining hall of the Bai clan was grand, with intricately carved wooden pillars and golden lanterns casting a warm glow over the room. The long dining table was already set, and before long, servants arrived, carefully placing down plates filled with golden, crispy pieces of fried chicken. Chu Zian's nose twitched as she caught the unfamiliar yet enticing aroma. The rich, Savory scent mixed with a slight crispiness in the air made her stomach grumble before she could stop it. She frowned slightly, feeling embarrassed, but Bai Zihan smirked. Heh, don't hold back. You'll regret it if you don't try. Without waiting for a reply, he picked up a piece with his hands, ignoring the chopsticks on the side, and took a bite. A loud crunch echoed through the hall as the crisp outer layer shattered in his mouth, revealing the tender and juicy meat inside. What could make me feel hungry just from the smell alone? Chu Ziyan thought. She, for one, didn't believe that fried chicken was just some normal dish. Such simple foods were meant for poor mortals. For Bai clan members and Chu clan members, only the meat of spirit beasts and rare delicacies like enlightenment tea were worthy of their status. She reached for a piece, still feeling a bit skeptical, but as soon as she took a bite, her eyes widened. The outer layer was crispy and flavorful, seasoned with a mix of herbs and spices she couldn't even recognize, while the inside was soft and juicy. The contrast of textures, along with the burst of rich umami flavor, made her pause in surprise. This, she mumbled, quickly taking another bite before she could even finish her sentence. Bai Zihan laughed. Good, right? As compared to the bland food in this world, a simple fried chicken is 10 times better, Bai Zihan thought. Chu Ziyan didn't even answer as she was too busy eating. The meal continued, with Bai Zihan eating at a relaxed pace while Chu Ziyan, despite trying to maintain her elegance, clearly couldn't resist reaching for more. Once they were finished, Chu Ziyan wiped her mouth and finally leaned back with a satisfied sigh. I admit this is good. I've never had anything like it before, Chu Ziyan said, attempting to regain her elegance, though it was already too late, given how eagerly she had been devouring the fried chicken. Of course, Bai Zihan said smugly. This is the cuisine of Earth. How could you have had anything like this? Chu Ziyan would normally do something about Bai Zihan's smug face, but today, she let him have his moment. It was indeed something out of this world. She also realized that fried chicken wasn't made from the meat of a spirit beast. After all, if it were, her cultivation would have advanced at least a little. It was just a normal chicken that mortals ate. However, the taste was heavenly, so much so that she craved more. Just where have you been hiding something like this? Chu Ziyan asked, staring at Bai Zihan and demanding an answer. Of course, this was entirely the creation of this young master. Sorry, whoever invented fried chicken on Earth. Bai Zihan shamelessly took the credit, though he felt a bit guilty. However, in this world, he was the first to introduce it, so it wasn't exactly a lie. Oh, really? Chu Ziyan asked skeptically. After all, Bai Zihan was a lazy young master of the Bai clan. How could he have found the time to create something so delicious? True. Bai Zihan insisted. Is he telling the truth? Chu Ziyan, still unconvinced, directed her question to Luo Qing. It is true, Lady Chu. Young master taught the chefs how to make this fried chicken. Luo Qing confirmed. Not only this, there's also steak, something called ramen, and many other delicious foods the young master has introduced to the kitchen. Luo Qing spoke enthusiastically, unable to hide her excitement. Her praise was genuine. Her most cherished time of the day was now when she got to eat these dishes. Chu Ziyan carefully observed Lu Qing's expression. Judging from the genuine praise in her voice, she wasn't lying. Though it was still hard to believe that Bai Zihan had created such out-of-this-world dishes, she was now more interested in something else. Other dishes, are they as delicious as this fried chicken? Yes. Then I must try them. As you say. Lady Chu. Luo Qing quickly went to inform the kitchen to prepare the other dishes. Bai Zihan stared at Chu Ziyan, amazed that she still wasn't full after devouring so much fried chicken. However, he was smart enough not to question a lady about her appetite. Soon enough, an array of dishes that Bai Zihan had previously taught the cooks was placed in front of Chu Ziyan. Without hesitation, she began eating heartily, just as she had with the fried chicken. By the time Chu Ziyan had finished eating, 5 empty plates were stacked on the table, all of them hers. Oof! She's more gluttonous than me. Even Bai Zihan, a self-proclaimed food lover, was surprised that someone as thin as Chu Ziyan had finished 5 plates of food. Delicious? I never thought food could be this good. Bai Zihan, you must give me one of your chefs, Chu Ziyan declared. After experiencing such flavors, the idea of returning to bland cultivation pills and tasteless meals seemed unbearable. Yeah, you can take one if you like, Bai Zihan answered straightforwardly. There were many chefs who knew how to make these dishes, so giving one away wouldn't make much of a difference to him. As long as she offered good compensation, most chefs would be more than willing to follow her. It seems like marrying you isn't such a bad idea after all. Chu Ziyan smirked. Bai Zihan suddenly regretted his decision. The more she enjoyed herself, the less likely she was to break off the engagement. Still, looking at it from another perspective, if the marriage was inevitable, at least keeping her happy meant he would suffer less. Chapter 32-32, The day of engagement. The grand halls of the Bai estate stood as a beacon of power and influence. Its towering pillars adorned with golden dragons and crimson phoenixes, symbolizing the union that was about to take place. The engagement of Bai Zihan and Chu Ziyan had become the most talked about event in White Cloud City, drawing the attention of the entire desolate Heaven Empire. At one of the most crowded teahouses in White Cloud City, merchants, scholars, and commoners alike gathered, their voices blending into a chaotic hum of excitement and disbelief. Did you hear? The Bai clan is holding the grandest engagement ceremony in decades. A teahouse owner leaned over the counter, speaking in a hushed but excited voice. Of course, who hasn't heard? A customer scoffed. But what I can't understand is why Lady Chu Zihan, a once-in-a-generation genius, is marrying Bai Zihan of all people. Aya, you're looking at it the wrong way. An older man stroked his beard and shook his head. It's not about love, it's about power. The Bai and Chu clans together would be unstoppable. Who cares if Bai Zihan is a waste? His family background alone makes it worth it. This is ridiculous. A guy like Bai Zihan doesn't deserve someone like Chu Zihan. Another customer sneered. It was clear that many were dissatisfied that someone like Chu Zihan was getting engaged to Bai Zihan. In a way, it was similar to the engagement between Bai Shuking and her ex-fiancé. But this time, Bai Zihan had someone with extremely powerful backing. Unlike Bai Shuking's ex-fiancé. Hemph. Even a phoenix like Lady Chu Zihan has fallen into Bai Zihan's hands. If not for his background, how could someone like him marry her? Even I am more worthy than that trash. Lady Chu is going to suffer at his hands. Alas, it seems that even a genius like Chu Zihan couldn't escape her fate. What people knew that the engagement between the two wasn't because of mutual love. In fact, they doubted that there was a single woman in the empire who could love Bai Zihan, given his reputation. They all believed it was purely an alliance between the two clans, with Chu Zihan as the sacrifice. If Bai Zihan knew what they were saying, he would likely cough up blood. Not only had he been forced into this engagement, but now people thought Chu Zihan was the one being forced to marry him. Regardless, both mortals and cultivators shared the same sentiment. Chu Zihan was pitiful to be engaged to the infamous Bai Zihan. The Bai clan, however, had gone to great lengths to ensure the event reflected their standing in the empire. They wanted the world to know that the Bai and Chu clans were uniting through marriage. A stark warning to their enemies that provoking one clan meant provoking the other. Golden lanterns lined the roads, red silk banners fluttered in the wind. And an immense spiritual array enveloped the estate, casting a divine radiance that showcased their prestige. Inside the Bai estate's grand hall, lavish tables overflowed with exotic delicacies, the finest wines, and fragrant teas. Yet, more than the extravagant setting, it was the presence of powerful figures that made this engagement a political spectacle rather than a mere celebration. This was no simple engagement. It was an event that could shift the balance of power in the empire. Among the distinguished guests were the heads of rival clans, powerful sects, and even a representative of the imperial family. The Bai clan, one of the three great clans of the empire, had long been a dominant force. Despite whispers of their decline, their foundation remained solid. And with the emergence of a genius like Bai Shuking, their future seemed secure once more. Bai Zihan's father, Bai Tianheng, presided over the event, his gaze sharp as he observed the gathered nobles. By his side stood Bai Shuking. Her mere presence was enough to capture the attention of many men in the hall. With Bai Shuking having broken off her engagement, it was now the perfect opportunity for them to try to win her favor. Not only a peerless beauty of the Bai clan but a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. On the opposite side of the hall sat the Chu clan, their demeanor calm but authoritative. Chu Xin, the Chu clan patriarch, exuded an aura of quiet intimidation, his strict and calculating nature evident in every movement. Beside him sat Madame Lan, Chu Zian's mother, who, despite her age, still possessed a striking and graceful beauty. The two of them were the most worried about their daughter, who had taken matters into her own hands by deciding to marry the infamous Bai Zihan. Now that the engagement was finally being announced to the world, they couldn't help but scrutinize their future son-in-law. Bai Zihan sat lazily in his seat at the center of the hall, draped in an opulent robe embroidered with golden dragons. His features were undeniably handsome, sharp, well-defined, and exuding the natural elegance of nobility. Yet, despite his striking appearance, no one in the hall looked at him with admiration. If anything, their gazes were filled with a mix of contempt and disgust. Bai Zihan had always been an enigma within the Bai clan. Heir to one of the most powerful clans in the empire, blessed with wealth and privilege beyond measure. Yet, when it came to cultivation, he was an utter disgrace. Compared to his sister Bai Shuking, a once-in-a-thousand-years genius, Bai Zihan was nothing short of a joke. His cultivation was embarrassingly low for someone of his lineage, barely reaching a level that would be considered passable even among minor noble families. Had it only been his weak cultivation, perhaps he would have been pitied. But Bai Zihan had ensured that he was despised across the empire. A notorious troublemaker, he had spent his years bullying weaker cultivators, harassing women, and stirring up conflict wherever he went. He had no respect for elders, disregarded clan traditions, and acted as if the world revolved around him. There were countless rumors of him abusing his authority, using his father's name to get his way, and suppressing those who offended him. Though he had been surprisingly quiet today, those who knew him doubted he had changed. A leopard never changes its spots after all. Meanwhile, Chu Zihan, the star of the engagement, sat with a poised elegance. Dressed in a flowing purple gown embroidered with silver phoenixes, she exuded both grace and an untouchable coldness, her expression unreadable. She was constantly approached by both men and women, offering words of encouragement, all with looks of pity. Chu Ziyan could only shake her head. She knew they were misunderstanding the situation. But given Bai Zihan's reputation, she understood why they pitied her. They all think that she is walking into the tiger's den, doomed to a life of suffering. Chapter 33:33 The Li clan's provocation. One of the Bai clan's greatest rivals, the Li clan, was seated with stiff expressions, their presence heavy with hostility. Li Jinhong, their battle-hardened patriarch, had led his strongest elders to this event, each one an elite cultivator. They had also brought in some of their greatest geniuses of the clan. Seated among them was Li Feng, the heir and probably the most talented person of Li clan. Unlike Bai Zihan, Li Feng had a solid reputation and was considered one of the most talented in the empire. Of course, even though he was talented, he was still nowhere near Bai Shuking, who had already reached the nascent soul realm at the age of steam. Li Feng's sharp features and smug expression made it clear. He had not come to celebrate but to ridicule. He had been eyeing Chu Ziyan with a lecherous gaze, his expression twisted with inappropriate intent. At the same time, he cast a look of disdain toward Bai Zihan, though he made a half-hearted attempt to conceal his contempt. Then next to the Li clan, there was the last of the three great clan of Desolate Heaven Empire. If the Li clan represented raw military strength, then the Zhao clan embodied political cunning. Their patriarch, Zhao Wuxian, was a man of shrewd intellect and dangerous ambition. He sat with a relaxed arrogance, his eyes gleaming with amusement as he observed the unfolding event. Beside him were also some of the strongest elders of Zhao clan along with their geniuses. The Zhao clan rarely acted openly, preferring to weave their influence through intrigue and sabotage. But it was one of the younger generations from the Zhao clan who had come to the forefront. Zhao Chen, the heir to the Zhao clan, a young man whose brilliance and ruthlessness were becoming well known throughout the empire, was seated beside Li Feng. Though still young, Zhou Chen exuded an intimidating presence. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and he exuded the same dangerous ambition his father did, though in a more subtle, backdoor manner. Zhou Chen glanced at Li Feng, his lips curling into a faint smile. Leaning in, he whispered quietly, "It's time." Li Feng's eyes glinted with understanding. He nodded, his expression turning cold and calculating. Without missing a beat, he stood up and raised his voice for all to hear. "Heef! The mighty Bai clan has truly fallen if they're forcing Lady Chu into marrying a good-for-nothing like Bai Zihan." Li Feng sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. His words were intentional, loud enough to echo in the hall, meant to provoke. Li Feng was confident because, with the backing of both the Li and Zhou clans, he knew there would be no repercussions for his insults. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Some were surprised by Li Feng's audacity, while others wore expressions of expectation, knowing that something like this would likely happen. After all, how could the Zhao and Li clans quietly watch as their rival gained another powerful ally through marriage? It was no secret that the Zhao and Li clans had their own plans to embarrass the Bai clan. Even if they couldn't stop the engagement, it was clear they would do everything in their power to humiliate Bai Zihan. Chu Ziyan's expression darkened, while Bai Zihan clenched his fists under the table. "This bastard, I don't even want this engagement. And now I'm getting humiliated for it." Bai Zihan didn't care much about the insults hurled his way. But it was frustrating to hear people think he was the one forcing the marriage when, in reality, it was the other way around. And of course, he knew who the person making trouble was, Li Feng. "This trash!" Bai Zihan wasn't afraid. Especially considering that Li Feng was no slouch. A powerful and talented cultivator from the Li clan. He would have been more concerned if the opponent was a lower-ranked cultivator trying to stop the engagement and claim Chu Ziyan as his own. After all, that was the typical trope for the protagonist. But Li Feng insulting him. That was the plot of the villain, and Bai Zihan had no qualms about teaching him a lesson. But before Bai Zihan could respond, a cold voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Oh, since when did the Li clan have a say in my marriage?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Chu Ziyan's phoenix-like eyes locked onto Li Feng, her gaze filled with danger. Li Feng faltered for a moment but quickly regained his composure. "I'm merely stating facts, Lady Chu. Everyone knows Bai Zihan is a waste. Why not choose someone more fitting?" While Li Feng was clearly insinuating himself as the better choice, and indeed, when compared to Bai Zihan, he considered himself a far more suitable candidate to marry Chu Ziyan. Bai Zihan rolled his eyes. This idiot wants to marry Chu Ziyan. Bai Zihan thought about how ridiculous the idea was. Though it might make him happy if Chu Ziyan agreed. He knew there was no chance of that happening. She was already against marrying someone other than him from the Bai clan, especially to avoid crossing Bai Shuking. Marrying into the Lai or Zhao clan would be an even worse betrayal. One that would alienate her from her family and make her enemies with the Bai clan, particularly Bai Shuking. "Oh. Then who is someone more fitting?" Chu Ziyan asked with a sneer, her voice laced with both curiosity and disdain. She already knew Li Feng was referring to himself but she decided to ask him anyway. "Of course it's me," Li Feng said with a smirk. Shizian, I've admired you for many years. And I can't hide my feelings for you any longer. Especially when you're about to marry someone unworthy like Bai Zihan. You deserve better. Whether his feelings were genuine or not, Li Feng's intention was clear. He hoped to derail the engagement. If trouble arose, the Li clan could always make excuses, claiming that the impetuousness of youth had driven him to rash decisions. Hemph. Chu Zian responded coldly. Young Master Li, you're thinking too highly of yourself. If you believe you can match my talent, then I'm sorry to be blunt, but you're still lacking. She shot back without hesitation, her words like a sharpened blade. Though Li Feng might have seemed a better match for her in terms of status, when it came to cultivation, he was still far behind. Chu Zian saw no need to sugarcoat it. After all, the Li clan had been a constant obstacle to the Chu clan's interests, and Li Feng had already shown his rudeness. There was no reason for her to hold back any longer. Li Feng's face flushed with embarrassment as Chu Zian's words hit their mark. His pride had taken a sharp blow, but he was not one to back down easily. His smirk faltered, replaced with a thinly veiled fury as he glared at Chu Zian. Hemph, Li Feng scoffed, trying to regain some semblance of composure. You might think I'm lacking, but let me remind you. Compared to Bai Zihan, I'm still 10 times the man he'll ever be. His voice was louder now, tinged with both arrogance and frustration, meant to be heard by all. He knows that he can't challenge Chu Zian, but he could take a shot at Bai Zihan, and that was his plan as well. He hadn't expected Chu Zian to become so protective of the engagement though. Her words and actions had caught him off guard, but even though this wasn't part of his initial calculation, he wasn't about to back down now. He would press forward with his plan and find another way to provoke Bai Zihan. He looked directly at Bai Zihan, his eyes filled with disdain. Bai Zihan is nothing more than a disappointment, someone who has no place in the circle of true cultivators. You, Lady Chu, deserve better than this. Marrying him will only tarnish your own reputation. Li Feng paused, letting his words settle into the atmosphere. He wasn't done yet. With a mocking glance at Bai Zihan, he made his next move. I challenge next move. Bai Zihan, if you think you're so worthy, then prove it. Let's settle this once and for all. A duel. If you win, I'll accept that you deserve Lady Chu's hand, but if I win, then the engagement ends, and Lady Chu will be free to choose someone far more deserving. Chapter 34 3-4 Zhou Chen's verbal trap. The room grew tense as all eyes turned to Bai Zihan. The challenge had been thrown, and there was no going back now. The crowd murmured, waiting to see how Bai Zihan would respond. Would he accept, or would he walk away? Knowing Bai Zihan's strength, many thought that he would probably avoid the fight since he wouldn't win at all. Bai Zihan's fists tightened under the table. His jaw clenched. He wasn't surprised by Li Feng's challenge, but the audacity of the man still grated on his nerves. Li Feng might have thought he could humiliate him, but Bai Zihan wasn't gonna let him get away with it so easily. Li Feng, who do you think you are to make trouble in the Bai clan? Bai Shuking's voice rang out with an air of arrogance and dominance. Your opinion is irrelevant here. And if you want to challenge someone, how about I accompany you? Bai Shuking said. Li Feng was flustered. He had never expected Chu Zian to be so against him breaking off an engagement with a waste like Bai Zihan, and now even Bai Shuking was getting involved. His plan was simply to fight Bai Zihan, and knowing Bai Zihan's short temper, he was confident that he would succeed. But who could have predicted that before Bai Zihan even spoke a word, first Chu Zian, and then Bai Shuking would respond to his threat? Him fighting Bai Shuking. What was the difference between that and suicide? Even with his arrogance, he knew better than to challenge Bai Shuking, who was already known as the strongest in their generation. Li Feng was caught off guard for a moment but quickly turned to Zhou Chen, his expression practically begging for assistance. The Zhao clan usually preferred to operate from the shadows, but in this case, there was no need to. Everyone knew about the Zhao and Li family's alliance, and it was no secret that they opposed the Bai and Chu clans' engagement. Zhao Chun, who had been watching quietly, finally spoke, his voice calm and composed. Miss Bai, there's no need to escalate things. He smiled faintly, his tone ever so reasonable. Li Feng merely spoke from the heart. He has feelings for Lady Chu, strong ones. At that, watching the woman he admires being engaged to another, especially someone he believes unworthy, is not an easy thing. His words were smooth and unhostile. They painted Li Feng as a man hopelessly in love rather than an arrogant troublemaker. He simply wishes for a chance, a duel, nothing more. Zhou Chen continued, his tone gentle yet firm. If Bai Zihan wins, Li Feng will have no choice but to accept reality and move on. Surely, the great Bai clan wouldn't be so petty as to deny a young man closure. The way he framed it put the Bai clan in an awkward position. If they refused, it would look like they were too afraid to accept a fair challenge. Zhao Chen's words caused murmurs to ripple through the crowd. Some people even nodded in agreement. However, Bai Shuking merely humphed, her cold eyes locking onto Zhao Chen. Enough with the flowery words. You're only saying this because you know how weak my brother is and want to bully him. Bai Shuking wasn't one to mince words. Her piercing gaze remained on Zhou Chen. Do you think I'm stupid? Zhou Chen chuckled, unfazed. Of course not, Miss Bai. His smile widened slightly before he continued, his voice still as smooth as ever. But there's no bullying here. Li Feng will obviously lower his cultivation to match Bai Zihan's realm. Won't you, Li Feng? Zhou Cheng. Of course. It's not like I enjoy bullying others, unlike someone. Li Feng answered. At those words, a new wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Zhao Chen is right. Love is heavier than Mount Tai. How can the Bai clan be so heartless as to not give a man a chance to fight for it? Humph, if Bai Zihan is truly worthy, why not prove it? A duel is the perfect way to settle this fairly. Li Feng is showing sincerity. If Bai Zihan refuses, doesn't that mean he himself knows he isn't worthy of Lady Chu? Exactly. Li Feng is even willing to lower his cultivation to match that of young master Bai Zihan. All eyes turned toward Bai Zihan. Even Bai Shuqing couldn't say much, as Li Feng was willing to lower his cultivation. Although she knew that even if Li Feng's cultivation was the same as Bai Zihan's, Bai Zihan stood no chance. Be it body refinement or technique mastery, Bai Zihan was far inferior to Li Feng. However, if she interfered, it would only make it seem like the Bai clan was afraid of Li Feng and subject them to public criticism. Now, all they could do was wait for Bai Zihan's response. Bai Zihan was simply watching the whole commotion as if it had nothing to do with him, despite being one of the main figures in this conflict. So, when everyone's attention shifted to him, he lazily looked at them and, in an irritated voice, asked, "What?" Bai Zihan spoke as if he had no idea why these people were looking at him. Zhou Chen's smile didn't waver, but there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes as he observed Bai Zihan's lazy and indifferent expression. With a light chuckle, he shook his head as if pitying Bai Zihan's ignorance. "Young Master Bai," Zhao Chen said, his tone calm yet edged with subtle mockery, "it seems you weren't paying attention. But I suppose that's to be expected." He glanced around, ensuring the crowd was still focused on them before continuing. "Allow me to explain it to you again. Simply, so that even you can understand," Zhou Chen said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Li Feng has challenged you to a duel. A fair one. He will lower his cultivation to match yours, so there is no excuse of an unfair advantage. If you win, the engagement remains, and Li Feng will gracefully step aside." Zhao Chen continued. "But if you lose, well, then surely even you must agree that Lady Chu deserves better than to be tied to a man who can't even defend his own honor." Zhou Chen's words caused another round of murmurs from the crowd. "That's right. It's not even unfair anymore. What excuse does Bai Zihan have now? If he refuses, doesn't that just prove he's scared? Even his own sister can't protect him forever. Sooner or later, he has to stand up for himself." Zhou Chen smiled at the reaction, then turned his gaze back to Bai Zihan. "Well, young Master Bai, do you accept it?" His words were sharp, pushing Bai Zihan into a corner. The entire hall was waiting for his response. "Puh, ha ha ha, you really think I care about your challenge?" There, chapter 35-35, The Price of a Duel. The laughter that escaped Bai Zihan's lips was neither loud nor exaggerated, but it was enough to make the already tense atmosphere even more suffocating. His tone dripped with mockery, his expression one of utter disdain as he lazily leaned back in his seat. This left many people, including Zhao Chen and Li Feng, utterly baffled. They had expected Bai Zihan to be furious or at least offended, but instead, he was sitting there, laughing like a madman. "Ha!" He chuckled again, shaking his head as if he had just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. His sharp gaze swept across the room before landing on Zhou Chen. "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do?" His words immediately silenced the murmurs around him. Zhao Chen's smile stiffened for a fraction of a second before quickly regaining its usual elegance. Zhou Chen was the genius of the Zhao clan, and there wasn't anyone who didn't know him or dared to disrespect him the way Bai Zihan just had. Moreover, he had been carefully steering the conversation to pressure Bai Zihan into accepting the challenge and hadn't expected Bai Zihan to turn the tables on him like this. Even Bai Shuqing struggled to counter Zhao Chen's eloquence. Yet Bai Zihan couldn't care less about appearances. Instead, he met Zhao Chen's words with outright hostility and rudeness. "He, and those who are saying that I should accept the challenge, step forward. I promise I won't destroy your clan," Bai Zihan said, his tone carrying an unmistakable threat. It was clear that he wasn't pleased with those who dared to support Zhao Chen and his ideas. The moment those words left his mouth, the entire hall fell into a dead silence. Who would dare step forward now? Who could guarantee that Bai Zihan wouldn't follow through on his threat? Seeing Bai Zihan taking control of the situation and asserting his dominance, Zhou Chen stepped forward, attempting to steer the conversation back in his favor. "Young Master Bai, isn't it inappropriate for you to threaten others just because you don't like their opinion? Isn't that the very definition of tyranny?" Zhao Chen's voice was steady, his expression unreadable. Bai Zihan clicked his tongue and lazily rested his cheek on his palm. "Zhao Chen, do you really think I can't see through your little ploy? You must be even dumber than you look if you believe I'd play along." Even Zhou Chen's expression flickered slightly. "Young Master Bai Zihan, what do you mean by that?" Zhao Chen tried to feign ignorance. Bai Zihan scoffed. "You hide behind flowery words and pretend to be polite, but all you're doing is trying to pressure me into accepting this idiot's challenge." Zhou Chen's expression remained calm, but his eyes flashed dangerously. Young Master Bai. I don't understand what you're trying to imply. This is merely a fair challenge. Bai Zihan interrupted, sneering, spare me the nonsense. Since when was it my responsibility to entertain a fool's delusions? He stretched lazily, making it seem like the entire situation bored him. Li Feng wants me to fight. And for what? Just because he's throwing a tantrum over an engagement that has nothing to do with him. Why the hell should I entertain his whims? A murmur rippled through the crowd again. Bai Zihan smirked. Oh Li Feng, you really think you're the protagonist in some tragic love story, don't you? Oh, my love, I cannot bear to see you with another man. I must challenge him to prove my feelings. Bai Zihan placed a hand on his chest in mock sorrow before rolling his eyes. What a joke. Laughter erupted from a few people in the crowd, though they quickly quieted under the weight of the tension. Li Feng's face turned red with anger. Being mocked so openly, Li Feng couldn't hold back his rage. His entire body trembled as he glared at Bai Zihan, pointing a shaking finger at him. Bai Zihan? Don't go too far. Li Feng spat. Ha, too far. So you barging into my engagement and challenging me isn't going too far. Bai Zihan shot back, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Bai Zihan, I just want to get over my love for Miss Chu Ziyan. Or are you scared to fight me? Li Feng provoked, his frustration reaching its peak. Previously, he wanted to fight Bai Zihan because of his clan's orders, but now, he genuinely couldn't wait to beat him up. Ah! Why should I dirty my hands fighting a sore loser? If you want to prove something so badly, why don't you go find a mirror and fight yourself? The hall fell into stunned silence. No one knew what kind of pill Bai Zihan had taken to give him the audacity to look down on both the geniuses of the Li and Zhao clans. Especially when he was considered the greatest waste of the Bai clan. Not only was Bai Zihan blatantly disregarding them, but he was also insulting them time and time again. Even Chu Ziyan was surprised by Bai Zihan's boldness. After all, even she had to be cautious with her words when speaking to them, yet Bai Zihan had no filter whatsoever. At least, you have some guts. Chu Ziyan thought to herself. Her impression of Bai Zihan rose slightly, though he was still the same arrogant young master in her eyes. However, his arrogance didn't waver even in front of the giants of the Desolavan Empire. It was ironic. When Bai Zihan treated servants and weaker people with this same attitude, he was seen as a bully. But when he showed that same arrogance toward the two strongest clans and their most talented descendants, suddenly, he was no longer a tyrant. He was a man of courage. Same behavior, different audience, yet the way people perceived him changed entirely, even though he treated everyone the same. Bai Zihan lazily leaned back, his gaze indifferent. And what's the reward for this fight? If I lose I have to cancel the engagement, but if I win I just get to keep it. He scoffed. Are you kidding me? Isn't this a complete loss situation for me? Zhao Chen, you're not stupid enough to think this is a fair challenge, right? That being said, having his engagement cancelled wasn't exactly a bad thing for him. But if it happened under these circumstances, it would cause problems for his clan. And while Bai Zihan didn't care much about his clan's troubles, he did care about how it would affect his own life. His father would make sure he suffered for losing. Besides, there was no way he was going to let the Li and Zhao clans achieve what they wanted so easily. Bai Zihan knew that even if his cultivation was suppressed to match Li Feng's, there was no way he would lose. But accepting the challenge just like that? No. He had to squeeze every last bit of value out of Li Feng and Zhao Chen first. Knowing how desperate they were to humiliate him and force him into accepting the challenge. Along with their confidence that Li Feng would win, Bai Zihan was certain they would offer a worthwhile reward to make him agree. I am gonna play along with your games but it ain't gonna be for free. They Chapter 3636 and Earth, Great Artifact. Are you mocking me? Even the ever-composed Zhao Chen couldn't help but grow angrier each time he was insulted and called stupid. He was one of the brightest minds of the younger generation, someone destined to become the greatest scholar of the desolate Heaven Empire. Yet Bai Zihan treated him like a complete fool. However, after calming himself down, Zhao Chen had to admit that Bai Zihan wasn't entirely unreasonable. Of course he would demand a reward. He realized that honor and fame meant nothing to Bai Zihan. After all, his reputation was already at rock bottom, and he showed no interest in changing it. Even if others called him a coward or undeserving, Zhao Chen understood that Bai Zihan simply didn't care. Unlike him and the other young masters of prestigious clans, who would go to any lengths to protect their pride. Hemph, I just need to bet something good enough for Bai Zihan to accept, no matter what the prize might be, Zhou Chen thought. Just as Bai Zihan had predicted, Zhao Chen had never even considered the possibility of Li Feng losing. Because of that, he was more than willing to offer a generous prize. With a subtle gesture, Zhao Chen signaled to Li Feng, who immediately understood what he had to do. Bai Zihan, since you think there's nothing for you to gain, how about this? If you win, you will receive an Earth-grade artifact from my Li clan. Li Feng's voice carried confidence, as if he were offering something incredibly generous. Gasps rippled through the crowd. An Earth-grade artifact was no small reward. It was a treasure that many cultivators could only dream of obtaining. A yellow, grade artifact was already enough to change a person's life. A profound grade artifact was the highest most mid-tier clans could afford. But an earth-grade artifact, that was something only a powerful clan possessed. Even some nascent soul realm cultivators might not have an earth-grade artifact due to how rare and precious they were. So, the guests at the Bai clan were shocked that Li Feng dared to bet such a treasure against Bai Zihan. However, after a moment of thought, they reasoned that since Li Feng would likely win, it didn't matter what he wagered. However, Bai Zihan merely raised an eyebrow before letting out a low chuckle. An earth-grade artifact. His voice dripped with condescension, as if he had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. Li Feng, do you take me for a beggar? The hall fell silent. Bai Zihan scoffed and lazily propped his cheek against his palm. Let me get this straight. You want me to fight some nobody just so I can keep my engagement, and in return, all I get is an earth-grade artifact. Do you really think my time is worth so little? Bai Zihan knew how precious an earth-grade artifact was, but considering that his opponents were from the Lai and Zhao clans, he was certain they could offer something better. Their overconfidence in Li Feng's strength only made it more obvious that they wouldn't hesitate to put up something even more valuable. Zhao Chen's smile stiffened slightly. Li Feng, on the other hand, was fuming. Bai Zihan, don't act so arrogant. An earth-grade artifact is already more than generous. Do you even understand how precious? Bai Zihan cut him off with a smirk. It's precious you say. Then let me ask you something. His sharp gaze locked onto Li Feng, eyes gleaming with amusement. If your love for Chu Zian is so strong that you're willing to challenge me over her, then tell me, why is an earth-grade artifact enough to prove it? Li Feng's expression darkened. Bai Zihan let out a mocking laugh. Or is your so-called love for Chu Zian only worth an earth-grade artifact? Not much of a love story. Huh. Bai Zihan leaned forward slightly, his voice laced with mockery. I mean, think about it. You came all this way, interrupted my engagement, and declared a challenge in front of everyone. Just for a woman. And you say you'll only bet only an earth-grade artifact. A cold smile played on Bai Zihan's lips. So tell me, Li Feng, is Chu Zian not worth more than that? Is she only worth an earth-grade artifact? If that's the case, how about this? I'll give you an earth-grade artifact, and you can take it and get the hell out of my sight. Li Feng's face turned red. Bai Zihan was completely looking down on him, treating him like a beggar. An earth-grade artifact was incredibly powerful, yet in Bai Zihan's words, it sounded like a mere trinket, something he could toss away at will. Bai Zihan's words had backed him into a corner. If he refused, wouldn't that mean he didn't treasure Chu Zian enough? Moreover, it would make it seem as though the Li clan couldn't even afford to properly wager against the Bai clan. But if an earth-grade artifact wasn't enough, was he really gonna bet a heaven-grade artifact? A heaven-grade artifact. That was a treasure so rare that even the greatest clans in the desolate Heaven Empire treated them as priceless heirlooms. Even the Li and Zhao clans only had a few, and only those who made great contributions to the clan would have a chance to obtain one. His mind was in turmoil. Seeing Li Feng hesitate, Zhou Chen suddenly stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Young Master Li, he said softly, his voice calm and reassuring, there's no need to hesitate. Li Feng turned toward him, his expression still stormy. Zhao Chen gave him a knowing smile. Do not forget. There is no way you will lose. His words carried confident certainty. Then, in a hushed tone, he leaned in closer and whispered. I will personally provide a heaven-grade artifact from my Zhao clan. You do not need to bear the cost yourself. Li Feng's eyes widened. He didn't know what gave Zhao Chen the confidence to say that he would provide a heaven-grade artifact, especially since Zhao Chen was of the younger generation just like him. But since Zhou Chen had made such a bold claim, Li Feng had no reason to hesitate. Besides, he was fighting Bai Zihan. There was no need to worry, he was never going to lose. The Bai clan's greatest waste, against one of the strongest geniuses of the younger generation. It was laughable. Li Feng took a deep breath before glaring at Bai Zihan. He said coldly. I'll wager a heaven-grade artifact against you. The hall erupted in shock. Heaven-grade artifact. Really? Is Li Feng really going that far? Young Master Li Feng must truly love Miss Chu Zian. Otherwise, who would be willing to bet a heaven-grade artifact? No matter what Li Feng bets, it doesn't matter. He's going to win anyway. Even Bai Shukim, who had been watching from the side, frowned slightly. A heaven-grade artifact even for a powerful clan like the Li clan, that was no small price. The Li and Zhao clans would suffer greatly if Bai Zihan won. But their willingness to bet such a treasure only meant one thing. They were certain that Li Feng would win. Bai Shuking worriedly looked at Bai Zihan. But Bai Zihan simply leaned back and smirked. No, that's more like it. His eyes flashed with amusement. Alright, Li Feng, I accept your challenge. Through chapter 3737, The Art of Shamelessness. The Zhou Chen and Li Feng exchanged a glance. Finally, everything was going back exactly as they had planned. They had successfully goaded Bai Zihan into accepting the wager, and now all that remained was for Li Feng to crush him in front of everyone. Once that happened, not only would they stop the marriage alliance between the Bai clan and the Chu clan, but Bai Zihan would become the biggest laughingstock in the entire empire. Li Feng smirked, his confidence returning in full force. He stepped forward and swept his gaze over the hall. Since we've settled the wager, let's not waste any more time, he declared. His aura surged, sending a sharp pressure through the air. His battle intent burned like a flame, ready to erupt at any moment. Bai Zihan. Let's begin. However, Bai Zihan didn't move. He remained seated, propping his cheek lazily against his palm, his expression relaxed, almost bored. Li Feng frowned. What's wrong, have you changed your mind? His voice turned mocking. Don't tell me, you're scared. However, Bai Zihan merely chuckled. Scared? His lips curled into a smirk as he tilted his head lazily. You think I'd be afraid of someone like you? Li Feng's expression darkened. It seemed like, in front of Bai Zihan, his reputation was useless. Bai Zihan has not been taking him seriously at all from the very beginning. Being disregarded by a waste was something he didn't like, but he endured it. He thought that soon he would make Bai Zihan regret this moment and etch into his memory just who he was. Then why aren't you coming here? Bai Zihan sighed as if he were dealing with a bunch of fools. Then, he stretched his arms and leaned back in his chair. Before we start, I have a question. His voice was calm, almost lazy, yet it instantly silenced the hall. Where's the prize? Li Feng blinked. What? The heaven, great artifact. Bai Zihan tapped his fingers against the armrest of his chair. Where is it? Li Feng's expression stiffened slightly before he scoffed. I'll give it to you after you win. Bai Zihan raised an eyebrow. So you're saying I have to fight first, win, and then just trust that you'll hand it over? He let out a short laugh. Do I look that gullible to you? Bai Zihan's words made sense. No one in their right mind would bet something as valuable as a heaven, great artifact without first seeing proof that the prize even existed. However, this was Li Feng, someone from the prestigious Li clan. And he had made the bet in front of all these people, including his own clan leader and the leaders of top clans in the desolate Heaven Empire. Unless Li Feng was a scammer or wanted Li clan's reputation to plummet, there was no way he would break his promise. But Bai Zihan didn't seem to consider any of that. He was treating Li Feng like a scammer. Li Feng frowned. Are you doubting my words? Bai Zihan smirked. Yes! Silence! Indeed, Bai Zihan was completely disregarding Li Feng's status and reputation. He didn't care about giving him any face at all. Call me cautious, but I can't just take your word for it. For all I know, you're just making empty promises. So, if the heaven great artifact isn't out in the open before the fight begins. He smiled coldly. I'll assume you were lying. Li Feng wanted nothing more than to smack the smirk off Bai Zihan's face. But he couldn't. Moreover, since he had never planned to lose, he had seen no need to take out the heaven great artifact. But not without it, Bai Zihan clearly wasn't going to fight. He had no choice. He glanced at Zhao Chen, signaling his intent. Since Zhao Chen had promised to provide the heaven great artifact, it was now his decision to make. By now, Zhao Chen was furious, his emotions barely hidden behind his expression. This Bai Zihan was seriously irritating him beyond belief. To think that a mere weakling could force him into this situation, Zhao Chen had no choice. He reached into his storage ring and reluctantly pulled out an artifact. Although he knew he would get it back, he couldn't help but feel a pang of reluctance as the heaven great artifact left his grasp. The moment Zhao Chen handed the artifact to Li Feng, a powerful energy fluctuation rippled through the hall. The crowd's eyes widened in shock. That's... A burst of hushed murmurs spread like wildfire. The artifact Li Feng now held was the celestial feather fan, a legendary heaven-grade treasure and one of the Zhao clan's most prized heirlooms. Even the most seasoned cultivators in the hall couldn't suppress their astonishment. The celestial feather fan, that's one of the Zhao clan's most powerful treasures. I heard it was refined using the feathers of a divine sky rock. It grants incredible wind-based abilities and can even summon storms. This proves how confident they are. Zhao Chen must be certain that Bai Zihan will lose, or he'd never risk it. The awe in their voices was undeniable. A heaven-great artifact wasn't just powerful. It was an inheritance-level treasure that most clans wouldn't part with under any circumstances. Even high-ranking elders of major clans wouldn't necessarily own one. Yet Zhao Chen had actually taken one out for a mere wager. Moreover, it was incredible that a junior, although genius, had obtained a heaven-great artifact. This just showed the incredible achievements and contributions Zhao Chen had made for the Zhao clan. Bai Zihan's expression didn't change, but his fingers tapped lazily against the armrest. Zhao Chen clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain calm. His expression was dark, but he still managed a smile. There, you've seen the heaven-grade artifact. Li Feng held up the celestial feather fan with a cold smirk. Now, will you finally step forward? His voice carried arrogance, as if the result was already predetermined. Bai Zihan glanced at the fan, then back at Li Feng. His lips curled into a smirk. Give it to me. Li Feng's eyes widened. What? Bai Zihan's expression was utterly shameless. Think of it as advance payment. If you win, I'll give it back. You. Zhao Chen couldn't decide whether to be furious or admire Bai Zihan's audacity. He had never been forced this much in his life. Not only had he been made to wager one of his most prized possessions, but now Bai Zihan wanted the celestial feather fan in his hands before even fighting. Just how shameless could one person be? Li Feng didn't know what to do. Since the artifact wasn't his, it wasn't his decision to make. He simply waited for Zhao Chen's response. Zhao Chen exhaled sharply. He had already made too many concessions. Letting Bai Zihan hold the fan for a few minutes wouldn't make a difference. Give it to him? Zhou Chen said through gritted teeth. Li Feng hesitated but eventually walked up to Bai Zihan and handed over the celestial feather fan. Here you go, he said with disdain. Bai Zihan smiled. Good, then, in front of everyone, he casually placed the celestial feather fan inside his storage ring, as if it had belonged to him all along. Li Feng's expression twitched. Now can we fight? He asked, his irritation barely concealed. Bai Zihan stretched lazily before finally rising to his feet. Sure. His lips curled into a confident smirk. Get ready to be trashed. Chapter 38-380 Bai Zihan vs Li Feng. The much-awaited fight was finally beginning. Excitement filled the air as every guest eagerly focused on the unfolding drama. However, the Bai clan side was not in a very good mood. After all, they all knew the capabilities of their good-for-nothing heir, who only knew how to create trouble. They all thought that Bai Zihan wouldn't last even 3 moves against Li Feng. The one who was the most worried was Bai Zihan's father, Bai Tianheng. This stupid son, he could have just shamelessly refused the fight. Initially, he thought Bai Zihan was making excuses and trying his best to avoid fighting Li Feng, including when he asked to wager something better than an Earth-grade artifact. But in the end, Bai Zihan accepted, which confused and worried Bai Tian even more. He even began to speculate whether Bai Zihan was intentionally messing around to avoid the engagement, which in this case would only mean that Bai Zihan wanted to get beaten up. Of course, he didn't interfere and watched with others as he was in the presence of many guests. If he interfered when it was the juniors competing with each other, it could affect the Bai clan's standing and reputation. So, like the Li and Jia clan leaders, Bai Tianheng was also forced to stay and just watch the commotion. On the other hand, the Li and Zhou clans were filled with joy, and some were already smiling. After all, against Li Feng, they thought that even 10 Bai Zihans would stand no chance. Even if both of their cultivation levels were the same. They all speculated that the engagement would be cancelled, bringing utter humiliation to the Bai clan. Other guests also thought the result was already predictable, with Li Feng winning easily. However, that didn't diminish the entertainment they felt from this, as they wanted to watch Bai Zihan's engagement fail, along with him being beaten up by Li Feng. The only people who weren't so certain about Li Feng's victory were those who had witnessed the confrontation between Bai Zihan and Bai Jin, such as Chu Ziyan. Chu Ziyan didn't necessarily think Bai Zihan would lose, especially if he showed the same strength as when confronting Bai Jin. Although she wasn't sure whether Bai Zihan could defeat Li Feng, she was certain that he wouldn't lose easily. Bai Shuking also watched anxiously, but there was nothing that she or any other person could do. It was all in Bai Zihan's hand now. Bai Zihan walked down and stood before Li Feng. The Bai clan's mansion was huge, and there was plenty of room for a spar. The guests had already made enough space for the two to fight comfortably, though many thought it was unnecessary since the fight would end in a jiffy. So, how are you going to decrease your cultivation level? Bai Zihan asked. Don't tell me you'll suppress it yourself and expect me to believe that you'll keep it that way. Li Feng smirked at Bai Zihan's words but didn't let himself be provoked. Instead, he reached into his storage ring and retrieved a small, ancient-looking jade pendant. The pendant emitted a faint golden glow, inscribed with mysterious runes that pulsed with spiritual energy. The crowd immediately recognized the item, the spirit sealing pendant. Someone from the crowd exclaimed, I heard that it can temporarily suppress one's cultivation by restricting the flow of spiritual energy in the danchan. Another murmured, once the spirit sealing pendant activates, it will lock my cultivation at the core formation stage for exactly 1 hour. During that time, I won't be able to access my golden core strength at all. Li Feng explained. I hope this artifact can put your mind at ease. Li Feng remarked. Good enough, I guess. Go ahead then. Bai Zihan knew about this artifact and understood that it would be impossible for Li Feng to break out unless 1 hour had passed. That meant that even if he were beaten up like a dog, he still wouldn't be able to retaliate as long as he had this pendant on him. Bai Zihan watched as Li Feng activated the pendant. Golden light surged around Li Feng's body as the artifact worked its magic. The overwhelming pressure of his golden core realm cultivation rapidly faded, and soon, the aura surrounding him stabilized at the core formation stage. A moment later, the light from the pendant dimmed, its runes fading slightly. It is done. Li Feng clenched his fist, testing his strength. His expression remained confident. Even if his cultivation was temporarily lowered, his combat techniques, battle experience, and physical strength remained superior to Bai Zihan's. Or so he believed. Bai Zihan simply smiled and looked at Li Feng as if he were a moth flying into a flame. Hif, I hope you're satisfied now. Can we finally fight? Li Feng asked. Sure. Let's not waste my time. Bai Zihan said, as if he hadn't been the one delaying the fight this entire time. With that, both fighters took their stances. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the battle to begin. Li Feng stood tall, his arms crossed over his chest, exuding supreme confidence. Well, what are you waiting for? Bai Zihan asked. I don't want to bully you too much. You can have the first move. Li Feng said confidently. It wasn't that he was arrogant. But he believed that Bai Zihan was no match for him. He wanted to completely humiliate him by offering the first move, and then defeating him easily. That way, Bai Zihan wouldn't be able to make excuses, and the Bai clan would be thoroughly shamed. Bai Zihan's lips curled into a smirk. Alright, he said lazily. I'll oblige. If some fool wanted to die faster, then who was he to refuse? Bai Zihan moved, perhaps too fast for a core formation cultivator. Before Li Feng could even react, Bai Zihan was already in front of him. Li Feng couldn't dodge in time and could only rely on his defense, raising his arm to block Bai Zihan's attack. Bang! A single, casual-looking punch shot forward, aimed directly at Li Feng's raised arm. The impact struck like a thunderclap. The moment Bai Zihan's fist connected, a sickening sask echoed through the hall. Aish! Li Feng let out a pathetic, high-pitched scream that sounded nothing like the composed, arrogant genius from before. His entire arm bent at an unnatural angle, the bones visibly breaking apart under the sheer force of the punch. The crowd was stunned into silence. What just happened? One punch? And it caused this much damage? Li Feng had even blocked Bai Zihan's punch completely. Yet his arm still shattered. Li Feng stumbled back, clutching his broken arm, his face twisted in agony. Even with his cultivation suppressed, he never thought he wouldn't be able to defend against Bai Zihan's attack. Yet the punch had been so powerful that it penetrated his ki-protected arm and directly broke his bones. That level of strength was insane. It had completely surpassed his own. Li Feng's once confident demeanor shattered as he gasped for breath, sweat pouring down his forehead. But Bai Zihan wasn't done. Before Li Feng could even stabilize himself, Bai Zihan stepped forward again. Bam! A knee to the gut sent Li Feng doubling over, his mouth opening in a silent gasp, his vision blurred as he felt all the air leave his lungs. But Bai Zihan still wasn't done. Smunke! A palm strike to the face sent Li Feng spinning in the air before crashing into the ground like a ragdoll. A.H. The once proud genius of the Li clan was now writhing on the floor, his screams echoing through the hall as he trembled in pain. The crowd watched in stunned disbelief. This isn't possible. How is Bai Zihan this strong? Is Bai Zihan really this powerful, or is Li Feng just too weak? Were Li Feng's cries filled the hall as the shocked bystanders watched Bai Zihan torment him. It was now clear as day. Li Feng stood no chance. The fight was already over. However, Bai Zihan didn't seem to want to end it just yet. Chapter 39 Li Feng's humiliation SMK! Smack! Disregarding everything, Bai Zihan continued to beat up Li Feng. The faces of the Li clan changed faster than lightning. One moment, they were gloating and smiling, and the next, their expressions turned devastated and grim. The Zhou clan wasn't faring much better. But at least it wasn't their clan that was being humiliated. Who could have ever thought that Bai Zihan was so powerful that he had defeated Li Feng with a single punch? Zhao Chen's face turned pale as he watched Li Feng get thrashed like a helpless child. Gritting his teeth, he finally stepped forward. But he knew that the moment he did, their plan had already failed. Now, all he could do was salvage the situation and make Li Feng suffer less. Or else he might be implicated by the Li clan for not helping when Li Feng was being humiliated. That's enough, Bai Zihan, he snapped, his aura surging. You've won, there's no need to continue. Oh, Bai Zihan interrupted, tilting his head. His smirk widened, eyes gleaming with amusement. But Zhao Chen, didn't you just say that Li Feng is deeply in love with Chu Ziyan? Shouldn't he endure this pain for the sake of love? Zhao Chen's expression froze. Bai Zihan chuckled darkly. I don't think he will give up so easily. He should still be able to endure more for his love. He turned back to Li Feng, who was whimpering on the ground, his face swollen and bruised. This is nothing compared to the pain of unrequited love. With that, Bai Zihan raised his foot and stomped down hard. Eh! A Li Feng scream pierced through the entire hall. Will you stop screaming like a little girl and take it like a man? Otherwise, you won't look good in front of Chu Ziyan. Puh. It seemed like despite Li Feng's condition, being unable to fight back and already covered in injuries, Bai Zihan still had no intention of letting him go. Li Feng also wanted to give up and surrender, but whenever he tried, Bai Zihan would smack him in the face, making him unable to concede. Just as Bai Zihan was about to land another punch, boom! A powerful surge of ki erupted from the Li clan side, shaking the entire hall. No! A thunderous voice echoed like a storm rolling through the room. The guests shuddered as an overbearing aura descended upon them. Even the weaker cultivators felt suffocated under its immense pressure. A figure shot forward like a meteor. Li Jianhong, the patriarch of the Li clan and Li Feng's father. His expression was dark, eyes filled with seething rage. He had been watching in silence, enduring his son's humiliation for the sake of decorum. But Bai Zihan's relentless beating was the final straw. Without hesitation, Li Jianhong raised his palm, his ki surging violently as he struck toward Bai Zihan with the full force. The attack was ruthless, fast and fierce. Aiming to crush Bai Zihan instantly? The guests gasped. Li Jianhong is making a move. He's actually attacking a junior in front of everyone. Isn't he afraid of his reputation declining? A mere core formation stage cultivator couldn't possibly survive a strike from a void refinement stage expert. When many guests frowned upon Li Jianhong's behavior, but no one dared interfere. This was a battle between the Bai and Li clans. However, boom! Before Li Jianhong's strike could reach Bai Zihan, a second burst of terrifying ki erupted. The figure materialized like a phantom, stepping in front of Bai Zihan. Bai Tian, the Bai clan's patriarch, Bai Zan's father, had finally made his move. Silang. The moment Li Jianhong's palm strike came down, Bai Tianheng's hand shot forward, intercepting it with ease. A deafening shockwave spread across the hall, causing teacups to shatter and weaker cultivators to stagger backward. The two patriarchs stood locked in place, their ki colliding in a silent battle of dominance. The tension was suffocating, as expected from a clash between two void refinement stage experts. This was a confrontation between the strongest figures in the desolate Heaven Empire. Bai Tianheng's gaze was calm but sharp as he stared down Li Jianhong. Patriarch Li. He spoke slowly, his voice laced with authority. Are you seriously making a move against a junior in front of all these esteemed guests? Li Jianhong's face was cold, his fury barely restrained. Bai Tianheng, your son has gone too far. There is a limit to everything. Do you expect me to just sit back and watch? Bai Tianheng didn't budge. His grip on Li Jianhong's palm remained firm, unyielding. And what of your son? Bai Tianheng asked coolly. Was it not he who challenged my Zan? Why didn't you stop him then? He narrowed his eyes. Or are you telling me that the Li clan can dish out challenges but cannot accept the consequences? Li Jianhong's expression twisted. You. Bai Tianheng's Q flared subtly, exerting invisible pressure. If you insist on attacking my son, he said, his voice turning icy, then don't blame me for not showing mercy. The meaning was clear. If Li Jianhong attacked Bai Zihan, then Bai Tianheng without holding back. Perhaps it could be the start of the war between the two clans. The entire hall turned deathly silent. The Zhao clan, who had been enjoying the spectacle moments ago, now watched anxiously. This was not part of the plan. Even if Li Feng had humiliated Bai Zihan, it should have been a fight between juniors. Not something requiring the intervention of elders. However, what Li Jianhong was doing was essentially escalating the conflict and turning it into a much larger issue. Something the Zhao clan did not want. Zhao Chen clenched his fists. With the involvement of the clan leaders, there was no place for a junior like him. Meanwhile, Bai Zihan casually dusted off his sleeves, looking completely unbothered. He glanced at Li Feng, who was still groaning on the floor, and smirked. Patriarch Li. He said lazily. Are you sure you want to interfere? Do you truly want to be the one to destroy your son's love? Li Jianhong's fingers trembled with rage. That love story was just an excuse to interfere with the engagement. But Bai Zihan had been using that story to his advantage to keep attacking his son. He wanted nothing more than to crush this arrogant brat, but he knew Bai Tianheng wasn't an easy opponent. Moreover, although they had similar cultivation levels, Bai Tianheng had always been stronger, and the earlier confrontation proved that he was still superior. Teach. After a long silence, Li Jianhong withdrew his hand. Hemph. Bai Tianheng released his grip as well, but his gaze remained sharp. You brat, you should know when to stop. Li Feng has already lost, Li Jianhong said angrily. Oh, so be it, I also don't have any interest in beating up weaklings. Bai Zihan said casually, further angering Li Jianhong. Li Jianhong gave Bai Zihan a final glare before turning to his son. Le Feng, he said coldly. Stand up. Le Feng, still in pain, trembled as he tried to push himself up. His legs were weak, his vision spun, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. The once proud genius of the Li clan looked nothing like before. Defeated, humiliated, broken, the guests whispered among themselves. Li Feng lost so miserably. Who would have thought Bai Zihan was this strong? What a turn of events. Bai Zhan yawned, stretching his arms lazily. Li Feng's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms. His shame burned hotter than his wounds. With one last glare at Bai Zihan, he turned and walked away, his steps unsteady. The fight was over. And the one who stood victorious was Bai Zihan. Chapter 44. Cultivate engagement complete. The entire hall remained in stunned silence. The tension still thick in the air. Though the fight had ended, the consequences of Bai Zhan's overwhelming victory rippled through the crowd. To think Bai Zihan was this strong all along. All the Bai clan's servants, who had always seen Bai Zihan as an idle young master who only preyed on the weak, swallowed hard. The way Bai Zihan had beaten Li Feng was far worse than how he would treat them. At the very least, it was somewhat reassuring to know that Li Feng, the young master of the Li clan, had suffered more than them, mere servants. The Bai clan's elders, particularly Bai Feng, who had always looked down on Bai Zihan, wore expressions of disbelief. Of course, there were also those elders who didn't particularly side with Bai Feng. Some of whom were pleasantly surprised and even happy that Bai Zihan, their hair was strong. But most of them were different. If Bai Zihan wasn't weak, then with his marriage to Chu Ziyan, removing him from the position of heir would become nearly impossible. How is this possible? Bai Feng muttered under his breath. All these years, Bai Zihan had been nothing but a troublemaker in his eyes. Someone unworthy of inheriting the Bai clan's legacy. But now, he had crushed Li Feng, one of the most promising young cultivators in the empire, with almost laughable ease. Although Bai Zihan had lowered his cultivation level to match Li Feng's, that still didn't change the fact that he had completely overwhelmed him. Even Bai Tianheng was pleasantly surprised and proud. At first, he had thought Bai Zihan was planning to lose on purpose to escape the engagement, yet instead, he had thoroughly beaten Li Feng. This made him incredibly proud. However, one question remained. Just how had Bai Zihan become this strong? As far as Bai Tianheng knew, Bai Zihan had an ordinary physique, perhaps even weaker than most, since he rarely trained seriously. On the other side of the hall, Bai Shuking widened her eyes in disbelief. She had always thought Bai Zihan was arrogant for no reason, relying on his father's status rather than his own abilities. Yet, the reality before her was undeniable. How did he get so strong? Or was he hiding his strength all along? She had known Bai Zihan since the day he was born, and she was certain that the latter's sudden strength was impossible. If he had been hiding his power all along, he would have had to conceal it since childhood. Yet, the reality before her told a different story. His strength was undeniable, far beyond what was typical for someone at the core formation stage. Within the same cultivation realm, he was much stronger than what was considered normal. Even she, the greatest genius of the Bai clan, wouldn't claim she could defeat Li Feng as easily and decisively as Bai Zihan had, even if she suppressed her cultivation to Li Feng's level. Yet, her younger brother, who was always lazy in training and had shown no progress for years, had achieved exactly that. She couldn't help but feel as though everything she had believed about Bai Zihan had been turned upside down. And then, there was Chu Ziyan. Her suspicions had been correct. Since Bai Zihan's confrontation with Bai Zhen, she had wondered if he was secretly hiding his true strength. If, in reality, his power was far greater than what everyone assumed. Now, the truth was laid bare for all to see. So you really were hiding it, Bai Zihan. A soft smile played on her lips, her eyes flashing with an unknown emotion. Then, let us proceed with the engagement ceremony. Bai Tianheng's authoritative voice cut through the murmurs. All eyes turned toward the main stage, where the engagement between Bai Zihan and Chu Ziyan was about to officially take place. The tension in the hall shifted. Though the fight had ended, the engagement was far from a simple formality. Now, every guest viewed Bai Zihan in a new light. The once dismissed young master had proven himself to be terrifyingly strong. Of course, that didn't mean his status had suddenly risen to that of a genius. His cultivation was still relatively low. After all, no matter how physically strong Bai Zihan was, without cultivation talent, he was still destined to be weak in the long run. The Li clan, still fuming from their humiliating loss, could only grit their teeth. Not only had their plan to ruin the engagement failed, but they had suffered a huge humiliation. And the Zhou clan, particularly Zhao Chen, was left frustrated. This was far from the outcome they had planned. Moreover, their heaven-grade artifact, celestial feather fan, was also taken away by Bai Zihan. But regardless of anyone's thoughts, the engagement ceremony proceeded. The grand stage at the center of the hall was quickly rearranged. Golden lanterns lit up, casting a warm glow over the intricate decorations. Jade pillars lined the stage, bearing the Bai clan's emblem, and an incense burner exuded a fragrant, calming mist. The guests, still whispering among themselves, turned their attention toward the main stage. Bai Zihan stepped forward lazily, as if he didn't care about the grand event unfolding before him. He adjusted his sleeves with a smirk, completely at ease despite the weight of countless gazes. Chu Ziyan walked toward the stage with measured steps. Her beauty was undeniable, elegant yet fierce, refined yet untamed. Her gaze flickered toward Bai Zihan, sharp and knowing. This man was going to be her fiancé from this moment forward. And perhaps somewhere in the future, she was going to marry him. As the two stood side by side, the officiator, an elder of the Bai clan, stepped forward. His voice rang clearly across the hall. Today, before the heavens and all esteemed guests, we witness the union of Bai Zihan, the heir of the Bai clan, and Chu Ziyan, the cherished daughter of the Chu clan. This engagement marks the bond of two great clans, forging an alliance of prosperity and strength. Bai Zihan yawned. Let's get this over with. Despite being the one getting engaged, and to one of the most sought-after beauties of the desolate Heaven Empire, his lack of interest was obvious. Any other man would be overjoyed. Marrying Chu Ziyan was not just about beauty, it was about power, influence, and prestige. The officiator continued. By exchanging these betrothal tokens, the engagement shall be sealed. A servant stepped forward, presenting two jade pendants, one engraved with the Bai clan's insignia, the other with the Chu clan's. Chu Ziyan's fingers brushed over the jade. It was cold, yet oddly heavy. Without hesitation, she took Bai Zihan's pendant and fastened it onto her sash. Bai Zihan, still as lazy as ever, took Chu Ziyan's pendant with a casual flick of his wrist, stuffing it into his robe pocket. The officiator's mouth twitched. At least pretend to be formal, the elder thought. It was a good thing that not many were paying attention to Bai Zihan's attitude, though perhaps with his already low reputation, they don't expect otherwise as well. Chu Ziyan turned to Bai Zihan, studying him closely. You're really good at hiding your strength. Huh. Hiding? I never hid my strength, nor do I have to. Bai Zihan replied lazily. Of course, apart from him, who would believe that his newfound power had only been obtained a few days ago? As for hiding his strength, if anything, it was already impressive that he wasn't flaunting it. Kim. Chu Ziyan wondered whether he was telling the truth or not. But that was something she wouldn't know. So, What do you think about the engagement? She asked. Nothing. It's not like I can do anything about it. Bai Zihan answered lazily. He was already resigned to it. He didn't bother protesting, so he might as well go with the flow. That's so. I wonder if you'll keep that attitude after we're married. For the first time, Bai Zihan's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Marriage? Oh right. The engagement was just the first step. In the future, he would need to marry this woman. Just thinking about it made his head hurt. Seeing his reaction, Chu Ziyan let out a soft chuckle. The officiator, unaware of the subtle exchange, raised his hand. With this, the engagement is officially sealed. A round of applause erupted. Yet beneath the surface, unseen tensions continued to brew. Bai Zihan had stepped out of the shadows with an overwhelming display of strength, but now all eyes were on him. The Bai clan's internal politics. The Li clan's growing resentment. The Zhou clan's scheming ambitions. And protagonists lying around to claim his life. The engagement was complete. But for Bai Zihan, this was only the beginning. Chapter 41:41 Leaving Bai clan, the morning sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the Bai clan's grand estate. The estate, usually a picture of serenity at this hour, was anything but peaceful today. Despite the early hour, the entire Bai clan was in an unusual state of activity. Servants rushed about, preparing for the departure of their young master, Bai Zihan. His admission to Heaven Sword sect had been announced right after the engagement ceremony, and the designated day had finally arrived. Excitement buzzed in the air. For most in the Bai clan, Bai Zihan leaving for the Heaven Sword sect was a joyous occasion. Many of the servants, who had suffered under his past arrogance and whims, whispered amongst themselves, secretly relieved that their young master would no longer be around to torment them. Finally, peace will return to the Bai clan. One of the servants muttered, exhaling as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Yeah, another agreed, nodding quickly. No more walking on eggshells, worrying about when young Master Zihan will throw another tantrum. A younger servant, who had only been working in the Bai clan for a short while, who didn't know much asked. Was he really that bad? An older servant scoffed. You weren't here when he used to order people around like we were ants. If you so much as spilled a drop of tea, you'd be trembling for days. Remember old Lu? Another servant chimed in. The poor guy got scolded for an entire hour just because the soup was too salty. In the end, he got fired over this issue. But after what he did to Li Feng, I don't know. A maid interjected, frowning. Maybe he's changed. Change? The older servant laughed bitterly. Maybe. But people like him don't just turn over a new leaf. He'll probably be causing trouble at the Heaven Sword sect instead. The group chuckled, some nodding in agreement. Well, at least it won't be our problem anymore. One servant said with a relieved sigh. Let the Heaven Sword sect deal with him. And with that, the tension that had loomed over the Bai clan for years seemed to lighten. At least for them. However, not everyone shared this sentiment. The kitchen staff weren't in a good mood knowing that the food god, which was considered Bai Zihan, would no longer be cooking new dishes. But more than anyone else, Lu Qing, his personal maid, felt a deep unease. Lu Qing had served Bai Zihan since childhood. While she was often fearful of him and his unpredictable moods, she knew no other life. The thought of him leaving filled her with uncertainty. Bai Zihan stood at the center of the courtyard, arms crossed, his expression one of complete indifference. His long dark hair was tied back neatly, his white robes embroidered with the Bai clan's insignia. To an outsider, he appeared calm and composed, but in truth his mind was busy with calculations. He had thought a lot about what awaited him at the Heaven Sword sect. If his guesses were correct, he would inevitably run into a few protagonists. These so-called chosen ones, blessed by fate, always seemed to have ridiculous luck, endless trump cards, and an inexplicable ability to overcome obstacles. But Bai Zihan was no longer the same person he had once been. At the very least, he had ensured that he would have the ability to escape when necessary. He had taken numerous artifacts from the Bai clan's treasury, though none of them were heaven grade. Even so, they were valuable enough to provide a decent level of protection. More importantly, his recent fight with Li Feng had yielded unexpected rewards from the system. Her unclaimed rewards available. He Run Le Clan's plan 10x cultivation speed card the 3 days. He Runja Zhou Clan's plan 10x cultivation speed card defeated Li Feng. 2,000 points naturally. Bai Zihan had wasted no time in using these rewards. He had spent the days following the engagement ceremony in strict seclusion within his training chamber, pushing his cultivation to new heights. His efforts had paid off. Talkshow host info Hin Host Bai Zihan age 16 cultivation realm core condensation early constitution nun martial arts 9 shadows flowing light sword minor mastery. With the 10x cultivation speed boost, the additional resources he received from the various clan as part of his engagement gifts, and his mastery of the merid breathing technique, he had successfully broken through to the core condensation realm. This was a major step forward in his path of cultivation. But he was well aware that it was still not enough. Every disciple of the Heaven Sword sect was at least in the core condensation realm. Even those younger than him had reached this level, and for those his age, the golden core realm was the norm. Compared to them, he was still lagging behind however. He had no intention of remaining at the bottom for long. He was catching up, and soon, he would surpass them all. Bai Tianheng, his father and the Bai clan's patriarch stood before him, arms clasped behind his back. His sharp eyes studied Bai Zihan, observing him in silence. In the past, Bai Tianheng would have taken this moment to warn his son, to remind him not to cause trouble, not to bring shame to the Bai clan. However, after Bai Zihan's actions during the engagement ceremony, Bai Tianheng had begun to reassess his son's potential. Perhaps at long last, Bai Zihan was starting to grow up. Rather than reprimanding him, Bai Tianheng chose instead to encourage him. You've proven that you are not as useless as others thought. Bai Tianheng said, his tone calm but firm. However, the Heaven Sword sect is no place for arrogance. Even among its outer disciples. You will find geniuses far beyond what you've encountered so far. Bai Zihan smirked. I know. Perhaps he understood better than anyone just how unfair the world was. There were those who struggled for years to grasp a single technique, while others could master it effortlessly with just a glance. There were those who would never see a heaven-grade artifact in their lifetime, while others seemed to obtain them at every step they took. He was not naive. Bai Tianheng nodded slightly. Good, then I expect you to rise beyond them. He waved his hand, and a servant stepped forward, carrying a black storage ring. This contains resources for your cultivation. Elixirs, talismans, and a few protective artifacts. Use them wisely. Bai Zihan took the ring and scanned its contents with his spiritual sense. While nothing inside was of the heaven grade or grade 6 pills, there were still some high-tier treasures. At least you're sending me off properly. Bai Zihan muttered. Bai Tianheng ignored the remark and turned to Bai Shuking and Chu Zihan, who stood nearby. Shuking Zihan, you are core disciples of the Heaven Sword sect. Help Zihan if he gets in trouble. Bai Shuking scoffed at her father's comment. So I'm expected to babysit him now? Chu Zihan, his fiancé, merely smiled and replied, Uncle, don't worry. Zihan will be fine with me in the sect. Before they could depart, a hesitant figure approached from the side. It was Luo Qing. The timid maid stood near the courtyard's edge, clutching the hem of her dress. She seemed as though she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Bai Zihan noticed her and raised an eyebrow. What? Lu Qing flinched. She lowered her head. Young master, take care. There was a brief pause. Bai Zihan hadn't expected her to say that. He clicked his tongue. Teach! Why are you acting like I'm never coming back? Don't be so dramatic. Bai Zihan let out a sigh and reached out, patting her head lightly. Just wait for me to return. He said, his tone unusually gentle. I'll be back before you know it. Lu Qing's eyes widened in surprise. It was rare, no, unheard of, for him to be this gentle. She stared at him for a moment before quickly lowering her head, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her dress. Why yes, young master, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Bai Zihan withdrew his hand and turned away, stepping toward the grand flying carriage without another word. Let's depart. With that, the three of them boarded, and the carriage rose into the sky. As Bai Zihan gazed at the shrinking Bai clan estate below, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The Heaven Sword sect awaited, and so did his next set of troubles. Chapter 42 42 Heaven Sword sect. In the desolate Heaven Empire, whispers filled the air as news spread of Bai Zihan's unexpected victory over Li Feng, adding to the already incredible news of his engagement to Chu Zihan. For days, the empire had buzzed with rumors and speculation about the battle between the two heirs. Li Feng, once the pride of the Li clan, had been humiliated by the infamous Waste of the Bai clan. He actually defeated Li Feng, the genius of the Li clan. I heard Li Feng stood no chance and just begged for mercy. For Zihan to pull it off, it's astonishing. Damn. This trash, if only he had won, Mrs. Chu Zihan wouldn't need to be engaged to someone like Bai Zihan. It seems like his reputation was all but a lie. Adding to the humiliation that Li Feng received from Bai Zihan, the people were angry at Li Feng because he could have prevented Chu Zihan's engagement but failed. Everyone thinks that Bai Zihan doesn't deserve Chu Zihan, and that sentiment stayed true despite the news of Bai Zihan defeating Li Feng. After all, Bai Zihan was still in the core formation stage, and his misdeeds were known to everyone. They thought that a girl like Chu Zihan would suffer under Bai Zihan's hand, not knowing that it was just the opposite. I also heard that Bai Zihan is going to be admitted to the Heaven Sword sect as their disciple. What? How can that be? With his talent, it is impossible for him to be qualified to enter the Heaven Sword sect. Damn! This Bai clan must have bribed some elders of the Heaven Sword sect. Looks like chaos is going to befall the Heaven Sword sect. I don't think their disciples are going to appreciate this. Lian indeed, as many thought. The news had also spread to the Heaven Sword sect, and many were not happy about it. The sect disciples, most of whom had been diligently training for years to gain recognition, were increasingly frustrated by the announcement that Bai Zihan would be admitted. Not only admitted, but also immediately accepted as an inner disciple rather than starting as an outer disciple. Can you believe it? That waste Bai Zihan is being made an inner disciple. On what basis? Even a 14-year-old has a higher cultivation level than him. Has barely entered the core condensation realm, and yet he is already an inner disciple. What about us? We've been slogging away here for years, having entered the core condensation realm but still an outer disciple. Now, some random kid gets to leap over us just because he has a good background. Where is the integrity of Heaven Sword sect? I am going to protest. The group of disciples who gathered in the courtyard exchanged disgruntled looks. Most of them had entered the sect at a young age, training tirelessly. They could easily be considered geniuses anywhere else, but here, they were just outer disciples. The news of Bai Zihan's sudden admission as an inner disciple struck a nerve with them. And more than that, they were angry at another fact. And this trash dares to be engaged to Senior Sister Chu. I can't believe Senior Sister Chu would willingly be engaged to someone like Bai Zihan. She must have been forced. With Chu Zihan's beauty and talent, there was no end to her admirers and pursuers in Heaven Sword sect, almost equivalent to that of Bai Shuking. Of course, those male disciples couldn't help but be jealous and angry at Bai Zihan for his engagement to Chu Zihan as well. I heard Senior Brother Lu Tian is furious about this. Senior Brother Lu Tian. The one who has pursued Senior Sister Chu for years. If that's true, Bai Zihan won't have a peaceful day the moment he steps into the sect. Not just Senior Brother Lu Tian. There are hundreds of disciples angry about this. Some because of his engagement. Others because of his ridiculous admission as an inner disciple. Senior Brother Lu Tian even declared that he would challenge Bai Zihan the moment he steps into the Heaven Sword sect. Challenge. More like humiliate him. But he is the brother of Senior Sister Bai Shuking and fiancé of Chu Zihan. Won't they stop them? Hemph. He must accept the challenge, otherwise, no one will accept him as an inner disciple unless he proves himself in front of everyone. We should go as well. If enough of us protest, the sect elders will have to reconsider. With that, a restless energy spread among the disciples. Bai Zihan hadn't even stepped into the Heaven Sword sect yet, but already, a storm was brewing, waiting for his arrival. Bai Zihan, on the other hand, was comfortably resting in the grand carriage, which was about to land at the Heaven Sword sect. The grand flying carriage soared through the sky, cutting across a sea of rolling clouds as it neared the Heaven Sword sect. Bai Zihan leaned back against the cushioned seat, arms crossed, his expression one of feigned indifference. Yet, his eyes occasionally flickered toward the window, taking in the scenery below. The landscape beneath them was breathtaking. Towering mountain ranges stretched into the horizon, their peaks crowned with mist. Rivers of crystalline water cut through the valleys, their surfaces shimmering under the golden rays of the morning sun. Verdant forests, dense and ancient, sprawled across the land like a vast emerald carpet. And then, emerging through the mist, stood the Heaven Sword sect. Perched atop the highest peaks of the Azure Sky mountain range, the sect resembled a celestial fortress. Grand temples and pagodas, their roofs adorned with golden tiles, gleamed under the sunlight. A colossal stone gate marked the entrance to the sect, its surface etched with the words, Heaven Sword sect, in bold, flowing script. The aura surrounding the place was profound, the very air thick with spiritual energy. It was a land where only the strong could stay. As Bai Zihan took in the sight, Bai Shuking spoke up from beside him, her tone cool and instructive. Listen up, Bai Zihan. Since you're going to be an inner disciple, you should at least know the basic rules of the Heaven Sword sect. Bai Zihan sighed dramatically, tilting his head toward her with an exasperated look. Bai Shuking continued to explain all the rules, big or small, but Bai Zihan wasn't listening at all. Finally, the carriage reached the Heaven Sword sect. As the carriage descended, Bai Zihan's expression shifted slightly as he noticed the massive gathering below. Hundreds, no, thousands, of disciples had assembled in the grand courtyard at the sect's entrance. They stood in clusters, their gazes locked onto the descending carriage. The atmosphere was tense, whispers and murmurs spreading like wildfire. Bai Zihan stepped forward, peering down at the gathering with a lazy smirk. I didn't think I was so popular at Heaven Sword sect. The chapter 4343's unwelcome at Heaven Sword sect, Bai Zihan remarked arrogantly, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. He could easily tell that these disciples were here for him. Though not to welcome him, judging by their expressions. But did he care about what others thought of him? Since they had gathered because of him anyway, calling himself popular wasn't exactly wrong, even if it wasn't in a positive sense. Bai Shuking sighed, rubbing her temples. Popular. More like hated, she said bluntly. Don't be an idiot. They're not here to welcome you. Indeed, the expressions among the disciples varied, some filled with disdain, others with barely concealed fury. Many were glaring at Bai Zihan as if he were a pest that needed to be removed. Bai Zihan chuckled, unfazed. Hate and admiration aren't so different. Either way, they're here for me. The carriage landed smoothly, the sect's disciples watching with expressions ranging from disdain to outright hostility. The moment Bai Zihan stepped out, a wave of hushed murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. There he is. The so-called inner disciple. Trash like him doesn't belong here. Despite the venomous words, Bai Zihan remained composed, his smile never leaving his face. He leisurely scanned the crowd, as if appraising a group of insignificant insects. Then, a voice boomed from the center of the crowd. Bai Zihan. A tall figure stepped forward, his aura domineering. Lu Tian, dressed in the traditional white and blue robes of the Heaven Sword sect. He exuded an aura of sharpness, like an unsheathed sword ready to cut down anything in its path. His gaze was piercing, and his expression was anything but welcoming. You dare to step into the Heaven Sword sect so shamelessly? Yi Lu Tian's voice carried authority, his cold eyes locked onto Bai Zihan. An inner disciple, you don't deserve it. And worse, you forced Chu Zian into an engagement. A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Bai Zihan tilted his head, amused. Oh. He placed a hand on his chin. Anyone could tell that Lu Tian had an agenda against him. And Bai Zihan could easily figure out why just from that last remark. This guy must be one of Chu Zian's pursuers, Bai Zihan thought. He had already anticipated that some lovesick fool would crawl out to cause trouble for him. But he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Right when he had just arrived at the Heaven Sword sect. Moreover, with the Bai clan backing him, what gave Lu Tian the guts to confront him so openly? There were many who would openly challenge him even if they wanted to. Who are you? Bai Zihan tilted his head as he asked. Himph, I am Lu Tian. Lu Tian spoke arrogantly. His name was well known, and he expected Bai Zihan to recognize him immediately after giving his name. Who? However, how could Bai Zihan, the arrogant young master of the Bai clan, bother remembering someone like Lu Tian? He genuinely had no idea who this man was. You. Lu Tian's aura flared, his eyes narrowing dangerously. He thought Bai Zihan was deliberately pretending not to know him. After all, Lu Tian was no mere bystander. His Lu clan might not be as powerful as the Bai clan, but it was comparable to the Chu clan. Moreover, he himself was a genius acknowledged by the Heaven Sword sect. Though his cultivation talent wasn't as high as Chu Zian or Bai Zhuking. He possessed a rare physique called the sword body. A trait that granted him extraordinary affinity with sword intent, allowing him to comprehend sword techniques at an incredible pace. Within the Heaven Sword sect, Lu Tian was regarded as one of the top sword geniuses of his generation. Not only within the sect but throughout the desolate Heaven Empire, his swordsmanship was renowned. Yet, despite all his achievements, the woman he had pursued for years, Chu Zian, had never been interested in him and had rejected him countless times. And now, instead of a genius like him, she was engaged to a waste like Bai Zihan. The sheer injustice of it burned within him. Moreover, this arrogant bastard had the gall to pretend he didn't even know who he was. Lu Tian clenched his fists, his sword trembling in its sheath as his aura flared even further. The disciples watching could feel the pressure exuding from him, sharp and cutting like an invisible blade. Bai Zihan. Lu Tian growled, his voice filled with suppressed fury. Enough of your arrogance? If you have any dignity, fight me right now. If you do, I will at least acknowledge your courage. Bai Zihan let out a lazy yawn, stretching his arms as if Lu Tian's challenge was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. You sure are noisy. Bai Zihan muttered, shaking his head first. You cry about my engagement. Now you want to fight me. What's next? Are you going to beg me to call off the engagement? Lu Tian's expression twisted with rage. His sword finally left its sheath, gleaming under the sunlight. The moment it was drawn, a chilling sword aura spread through the courtyard, forcing several weaker disciples to instinctively step back. If you have any pride as a cultivator, then fight me. Or are you afraid to prove that you're nothing but a waste hiding behind your clan's name? Lu Tian roared. Bai Zihan chuckled. So let's say I am. What is your problem? Bai Zihan said. He wasn't some shallow fool who did everything for the sake of fame or saving face. In the end, those things didn't matter much. As the saying went, only the poor use morality to act superior. Because they have nothing else. It was the same here. Lu Tian had no real justification for his anger and could only resort to slander as an excuse to challenge Bai Zihan. You. Lu Tian's patience snapped. Against Bai Zihan, who seemed completely indifferent to his reputation, there was little Lu Tian could do. Unless he was willing to attack first and force a fight. But that would mean making an enemy of the Bai clan, and who knew what kind of trouble that would bring to his own family. Moreover, with Bai Zhuking present, any attempt at an attack would be futile. She would intercept him effortlessly, and likely beat him to a pulp. That's enough. Chu Zian stepped forward, stopping the conflict from growing further. Lu Tian, you have no right to challenge Bai Zihan, Chu Zian declared. A stunned silence fell over the courtyard. Bai Zihan raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. Well, looks like my fiancée is quite protective of me. Bai Zihan intentionally said, further angering Lu Tian and other boys who pursue Chu Zian. Lu Tian clenched his jaw. His crush was here in front of him defending another boy. How could he not be hurt by this? Junior sister Chu, you. Chu Zian's gaze sharpened. You. Do I need to repeat myself? Lu Tian trembled with frustration but knew he couldn't go against her. With a deep breath, he withdrew his sword and took a step back. This isn't over, he muttered darkly. Chu Zian ignored him and turned to Bai Zihan. You. Come with me. Bai Zihan's smirk widened. So eager to be alone with me. How bold. Chu Zian's eye twitched. Shut up and move. As the two walked away, the crowd could only stare in shock. Chapter 44 Meeting with Bai Zihan, while accompanying Chu Zian, was feeling a bit nervous. Did I play too much? He thought that his earlier words, which were meant to anger Lu Tian and the others by sounding affectionate with Chu Ziyan, had somewhat angered her as well. However, thinking about his new body, he realized that even if Chu Ziyan beat him up, he wouldn't feel any pain. Though, it would be a different case if she were to seriously attack him using her nascent soul realm cultivation. Sorry. Contrary to what he had expected, Chu Ziyan immediately bowed and apologized. This is happening because of me. Chu Ziyan's apology greatly shocked Bai Zihan. He almost jumped up in surprise, suspecting that she was scheming something. However, after a long silence, it seemed like Chu Ziyan was just seriously apologizing. Don't worry. This is nothing. Not knowing what to say to the apologetic Chu Ziyan, he could only express his honest thoughts. Really? He hadn't thought much about what had happened. Even if he weren't engaged to Chu Ziyan, as long as he was the one who came to the Heaven Sword sect, those disciples would have troubled him anyway. The only reason they thought they could act this way was that they all believed he was unworthy of joining the Heaven Sword sect and of being Chu Ziyan's fiancé. He didn't care either way. Perhaps more than that, he found it amusing. After all, most of the people in the Bai clan feared him and never retaliated against him. Making these disciples submit could be a new source of entertainment for him. At least, that was what Bai Zihan was feeling. In the end, I am a villain. Bai Zihan thought while reflecting on his perspective of the situation. He never considered compromising or trying to be friendly with those people. His first instinct was to toy with them and make them realize who they were messing with. Aha, indeed. Something like this wouldn't affect young Master Bai, who is famous for making trouble everywhere. Chu Ziyan laughed. Tesk. One moment you pretend to be apologetic, and the next you make fun of me. Bai Zihan thought. Then, let's go to the admission office. We need to register you as an inner disciple of the Heaven Sword sect. Shuking should be waiting for us. With that, the two of them made their way to the admission office. During that time, many people were looking at them, probably drawn to Chu Ziyan. But there were also those glaring at Bai Zihan with expressions completely opposite to those admiring Chu Ziyan. Bai Zihan could really feel that he wasn't welcomed by these disciples of the Heaven Sword sect. Soon, they reached the admission office, where Chu Ziyan spotted Bai Shuking and immediately made her way toward her. The admission office of the Heaven Sword sect was located within a grand hall, its architecture exuding an aura of prestige and authority. As Bai Zihan and Chu Ziyan stepped inside, the air grew tense. The disciples present immediately took notice, whispering among themselves. At the front of the hall, Bai Shuking was already waiting, her arms crossed, her face carrying an expression of mild annoyance. She had been handling Bai Zihan's admission process while waiting for him to arrive. However, judging from her irritated gaze, things weren't going smoothly. As Chu Ziyan approached, Bai Shuking sighed and shook her head. They're refusing his admission, she said flatly. Bai Zihan raised an eyebrow, his amusement growing. On what grounds? Wasn't it already agreed that Bai Zihan would be admitted as a disciple? Bai Shuking gestured toward an elder sitting behind a large desk, his expression one of cold disapproval. He was Elder Lu, one of the elders in charge of sect affairs. From the way he looked at Bai Zihan, it was clear he wanted nothing to do with him. The Bai clan might be powerful, but that doesn't mean we'll blindly accept just anyone as an inner disciple. Elder Lu said, his tone sharp. The Heaven Sword sect has its standards. Chu Ziyan frowned. Elder Lu, Bai Zihan's admittance was already approved by my master and the sect's higher-ups. Why are you making things difficult now? Elder Lu sneered. Even if Elder Lu sneered, the final admission process requires the acknowledgement of the elder in charge. As an elder, I have the authority to deny anyone who does not meet the standards of our sect. Bai Zihan chuckled. Interesting. So despite the decision being made by those above you, you think you have the authority to overturn it? Truly ignorant. Elder Lu's face darkened. You. Bai Zihan. Can't you keep your mouth shut for a second? Bai Shuking reprimanded him. Although Elder Lu was making things difficult, he was still an elder of the Heaven Sword sect, and should be respected. But alas, as expected of Bai Zihan, he didn't care and even called the elder ignorant. Before Elder Lu could continue, a voice suddenly cut through the hall. Well, if it isn't young Master Bai. A tall figure entered, his steps confident as he approached the group. It was Shen Lang. The man's eyes glowed with amusement as he looked at Bai Zihan, clearly enjoying the situation. What a surprise! I heard that you are joining the Heaven Sword sect. Senior brother Shen Liang said, smirking. Bai Zihan looked at Shen Liang for a second and asked. Ooh, Bai Zihan intentionally asked. Unlike when he genuinely didn't know who Lu Tian was, how could he not recognize Shen Liang whom he had recently humiliated? However, he didn't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking that he was worthy of being remembered. Moreover, considering the timing of his appearance, Bai Zihan could already tell that it must have been him interfering with his admission. Shen Liang was taken aback by the question but quickly regained his composure. Hiao, it seems like young Master Bai has memory problems. I was at the Bai clan a few weeks ago and even had a conversation with you. Shen Liang said sarcastically. Oh. Bai Zihan suddenly smacked his palm against his other hand, as if just remembering. You're that troublemaker who dared to cause a scene in the Bai clan and refused to apologize even though you were in the wrong. Bai Zihan continued his act. I see, you must be colluding with this elder to make trouble for me. The chapter 4545 want to get slap again. Bai Zihan openly exposed Shen Liang's scheme. Shen Liang couldn't help but get angry. He had been falsely accused at the Bai clan and even got slapped without justice, and now he was being defamed again by Bai Zihan. Though this time, it was true that it was all his scheme. Bai Zihan's accusation had already caught the attention of the surrounding disciples, who were eagerly watching the commotion. Does senior brother Shen have a problem with Bai Zihan? What's this about senior brother Shen causing trouble in the Bai clan? Did he really do it, or is Bai Zihan falsely accusing him? Senior brother Shen has a good relationship with Bai Shuking. He shouldn't make things too difficult for Bai Zihan, or she might hate him. After all, blood is thicker than water. With the conflict between Bai Zihan and Shen Liang had drawn quite the audience, which was already growing bigger because of the presence of Bai Zihan, Chu Xian and Bai Shuking. It was unexpected since everyone knew that Shen Liang was pursuing Bai Shuking, and he wouldn't want to get on the bad side of her family if he wished to win her heart. Moreover, Bai Zihan's first accusation might have been questionable, but the second one was quite plausible. After all, the head of the admission office was Elder Shen, Shen Liang's uncle. It wouldn't be difficult for him to instruct Elder Lu to block Bai Zihan's admission using his uncle's name. Perhaps, at another time, the disciples might have criticized Bai Zihan for making such accusations, but instead they were pleased. After all, it meant he couldn't enter the Heaven Sword sect. Bai Zihan, stop with your false accusations. I was just curious about why so many disciples were gathered here and happened to stumble upon you. Shen Liang gave a reasonable excuse. He then immediately looked at Bai Shuking, wanting to see what kind of expression she had and whether she believed Bai Zihan's words. However, her expression remained unreadable, though there was a mild annoyance on her face. Junior sister, please believe me? I don't know why your brother hates me, but he has been targeting me since we met at the Bai clan. You can't believe him. Bai Shuking, meanwhile, remained indifferent. She glanced at Bai Zihan, who looked completely unbothered, then turned to Shen Liang, her tone flat. Senior brother, let's not waste time with unnecessary words. If you truly have nothing to do with this, then don't interfere. I need to quickly register his name as a disciple of Heaven Sword sect. Shen Liang felt a chill at her distant response. For a moment, frustration flickered in his eyes. He had spent so much effort trying to get closer to Bai Shuking, yet she remained cold toward him. He even felt that she was more distant than before her engagement was cancelled. Suppressing his emotions, Shen Liang let out a forced chuckle. Of course, junior sister. I simply thought there might be something I could do to help you. Bai Zihan raised an eyebrow. Oh. Shen Liang nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. This situation with Elder Lu, if I vouch for you, he might reconsider. Shen Liang continued. But for that to happen, Bai Zihan, you need to show some sincerity. Bai Zihan smirked. He had been waiting for this. And what kind of sincerity are you asking for, Shen Liang? Shen Liang smiled, his eyes sharp. It's simple, he said, stepping closer. You just need to admit that you falsely accused me back at the Bai clan. That you were the one who harassed my junior sisters. His voice was calm, but his intent was clear. Apologize for your mistake, and I will personally ensure your admission goes smoothly. Silence fell upon the hall. The surrounding disciples watched intently. Some whispered, already assuming Bai Zihan would refuse. Others, who disliked him, smirked, hoping to see him humiliated, just like Lu Tian, who was thinking about how unlucky Bai Zihan was to have gotten on Shen Liang's bad side. Unlike him, Shen Liang was at the nascent soul realm. Even in the presence of Chu Xian or Bai Shuking, there was no need for him to be scared. Bai Zihan stared at Shen Liang for a moment. Then, suddenly, paffed, ha ha, he burst into laughter. His laugh echoed through the hall, filled with amusement and mockery. The disciples of Heaven Sword sect frowned upon seeing him laugh as if he were mocking them. Shen Liang's expression darkened. Bai Zihan. But Bai Zihan raised a hand, cutting him off. Shen Liang. Let me get this straight. His lips curled into a smirk. You want me to admit to something I didn't do, bow my head to you, and then, you'll help me. Shen Liang didn't respond immediately, but his silence was already an answer. Moreover, he wanted to curse at Bai Zihan. Bai Zihan was acting as if he truly hadn't done anything while, in reality, he had. But time and again, he accused him instead, making it seem like Shen Liang was the one fabricating everything. Bai Zihan's eyes gleamed with amusement. I'll ask this question again. Who do you think you are? His words were light, but the sharpness behind them was undeniable. Bai Zihan's eyes shifted from playful mockery to a cold, piercing gaze. One that carried the weight of absolute superiority, as if he were looking down at an insignificant ant. Sorry, but I don't need your help. Shen Liang's jaw clenched. Bai Zihan took a leisurely step forward. Now standing face to face with him. In fact, he continued, his tone playful. I don't even know why you dared to show your face here. Want to get slapped again? Shen Liang's hand twitched. This bastard. Senior brother rumors. But I didn't think they were true. No wonder he's making trouble for Bai Zihan. How could he let go of such hatred? He could feel the eyes of everyone in the hall on him. While some were surprised by Bai Zihan's words, others felt like laughing. After all, the respected and admired senior brother had been slapped by the so-called waste of the Bai clan. Wasn't that too funny? Shen Liang wanted nothing more than to shut Bai Zihan's mouth, but Bai Shuking was watching. Shen Liang gritted his teeth. You dare mention this? And Elder Lu, who had been silent, now stepped forward, his voice cold. Since Bai Zihan refuses to show sincerity, then there is nothing more to discuss. He looked at Bai Zihan with disdain. The Heaven Sword sect does not accept arrogant, dishonorable individuals. Bai Zihan chuckled. So now I'm dishonorable for refusing to bow to someone's petty ego. Seems like you aren't even hiding the fact that you're being ordered around by Shen Liang. Now, who is the dishonorable one? Elder Lu's face twisted with anger. Shen Liang, feeling the moment slipping out of his control, spoke again. Bai Zihan, this is your last chance. But Bai Zihan simply smirked. I don't take orders from losers. Chapter 46-460 Elder Qinglin, Shen Liang's expression turned cold, his hands clenched into fists. A flicker of killing intent flashed in his eyes. But he quickly suppressed it. No matter how much he wanted to slap Bai Zihan across the face, he couldn't afford to act recklessly. Not when other disciples were present. After all, this was his territory, and he believed he could get justice for what he had suffered unfairly at the Bai clan. Bai Zihan, on the other hand, remained utterly relaxed, even tilting his head slightly as if daring Shen Liang to make a move. Elder Lu, unwilling to let this mockery continue, spoke again. Nuff. His voice boomed through the hall. Bai Zihan, since you don't want to compromise, your admission to the Heaven Sword sect is denied. You are not welcome here. A silence fell over the disciples. For many this was exactly what they wanted, to see Bai Zihan get kicked out. But instead of looking concerned, Bai Zihan simply raised an eyebrow. Oh. Is that so? Almost happily. If that was really the case, Bai Zihan couldn't help but feel happier. After all, he wasn't interested in joining the Heaven Sword sect to begin with. He could quietly grow stronger at home without needing anyone else's help. Only the system. He turned to Chu Zian and Bai Shuking, as if checking whether they had anything to say. Bai Zihan wasn't going to take any initiative to enter the Heaven Sword sect, but he needed to see what Bai Shuking and Chu Zian would do. Chu Zian frowned. Elder Lu, you do not have the authority to reject his admission like this. My master already agreed. Elder Lu snorted. The decision has already been made. If you want to challenge it, take it up with your master. Bai Shuking sighed and shook her head. Fine. Seems like I'll have to bring my master. If Elder Lu didn't want to register Bai Zihan, then she couldn't do anything except complain to her master. Just as she was about to turn, no need. A clear, calm voice echoed from the entrance. Everyone turned their heads sharply. And then, she appeared. A graceful figure in flowing azure robes descended from the sky, landing silently at the entrance to the hall. Her presence alone silenced the crowd. Every step she took carried the weight of authority and elegance. In that moment, even the arrogant Elder Lu froze, as if struck by lightning. Tap, tap. The sound of light footsteps echoed as the woman entered. She wore flowing azure robes, her long black hair trailing behind her like a silken stream. Her eyes were sharp like polished jade, radiating a calm intensity that could silence storms. Even her simple stance exuded natural elegance, like a sword in its sheath. Hidden, but deadly. Master. Chu Zian and Bai Shuking called out in unison, quickly stepping aside with respect. Peak Master Qinglin. The disciples immediately lowered their heads and clasped their fists in deep respect. Elder Qinglin. A name known throughout the Heaven Sword sect and even across the desolate Heaven Empire. Once a prodigy of the sect, she had reached the peak of the nascent soul realm before the age of 18 and was rumored to be undefeated in her generation. She was also one of the few cultivators personally recognized by the sect leader. Years ago, she had single-handedly repelled a demonic invasion at the southern frontier. I heard there was an issue with my new disciple. Bai Zihan looked at the approaching woman who declared herself his new master. Something he expected, as inner disciples needed to choose a master and join a peak. His default master was Chu Zian and Bai Shuking's master, who had already accepted him. Elder Qinglin's gaze swept across the hall before landing on Bai Zihan. So, this is the heir of the Bai clan and my new disciple. She could identify him easily by his clothing and, more notably, because he was the only disciple who hadn't greeted her. Indeed, with Bai Zihan's personality, it was impossible for him to display humble manners. The way he carried himself was arrogant. Even in front of the elders of the Heaven Sword sect, including the renowned Elder Qinglin, his future master. However, she didn't seem to mind his lack of courtesy or care about such displays. Unlike some people who become offended when not properly greeted or acknowledged. Those with power often demanded deference. But Elder Qinglin appeared indifferent to such things, which was fortunate for Bai Zihan, who didn't know anything about respecting others. Elder Qinglin turned to Elder Lu. No, explain to me on whose authority did you reject Bai Zihan's admission? Elder Lu tried to maintain composure. I simply judged his character unfit. He even dared to insult me, an elder of the Heaven Sword sect. That is your excuse. Elder Qinglin cut him off, her tone serene but laced with unmistakable pressure. Before her, Elder Lu was nothing. Their positions were worlds apart. As a peak master, Elder Qinglin held far more authority than Elder Lu. Only someone like Elder Shen, the head of the admission office, was her equal in the sect's hierarchy. His recommendation was approved by me and personally acknowledged by the sect leader. If you believe he is unfit, then you are questioning the sect leader's judgment. Do you intend to take responsibility for those words, Elder Lu? The hall fell into dead silence. Elder Lu's lips quivered. I didn't know. He tried to offer an excuse. But he had been warned. Both Chu Zian and Bai Shuking had informed him, yet he remained adamant about rejecting Bai Zihan. He intended to cause trouble on Shenliang's behalf. After that, he wouldn't need to do anything more. Elder Shen would handle the rest. But no one had expected Elder Qinglin to personally appear while he was deliberately making things difficult for Bai Zihan. Even Shenliang could only keep his head down, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Hemph. I don't want to waste my time. Quickly register him as inner disciple under my mystic moon peak. Elder Lu's legs nearly gave out beneath him. He lowered his head. I understand. He breathed a sigh of relief that Elder Qinglin wasn't taking further action. Indeed, Elder Qinglin didn't usually involve herself in matters that didn't concern her, especially sect politics. She was a person focused primarily on cultivation and guiding her disciples. Chapter 47 Joining the Heaven Sword sect, Elder Lu took no time to register Bai Zihan as a disciple of the Heaven Sword sect under the angered looks of the surrounding disciples. However, the disciples knew better than to protest in front of Elder Qinglin, who had even made Elder Lu afraid. Even Shenliang quietly stayed in his place without interfering. He consoled himself that Bai Zihan would remain in the Heaven Sword sect where he was the influential one, and could take revenge anytime he wanted. Other disciples also had similar thoughts, that they could make Bai Zihan's life difficult within the sect and force him to quit voluntarily. Elder Qinglin turned to Chu Zian and Bai Shuking, then to Bai Zihan. We're leaving. Elder Qinglin declared. Yes, master. They said in unison, following Elder Qinglin. Bai Zihan did the same, though he didn't forget to flash a triumphant expression toward Shenlong and the others. Obviously, this angered Shenlong and the rest. But there was nothing that they could do with Elder Qinglin by Bai Zihan's side. As they left, Elder Qinglin walked beside Bai Zihan. She placed a hand on his shoulder and then said, You're not as simple as you seem. Bai Zihan tilted his head. Neither are you. He replied arrogantly, as if he was powerful enough to comment about Elder Qinglin. She let out a soft laugh. Maybe. That makes two of us. It was the first time she had taken such an interesting disciple as Bai Zihan. Her other disciples were very respectful and would never utter such words to her. Initially, she had only agreed to accept Bai Zihan as a disciple of her peak because the sect leader had asked her. And the reason the sect leader chose to accept Bai Zihan into the sect in the first place seemed to stem from some sort of promise made with the Bai clan. The reason for choosing her peak was because Bai Zihan was Bai Shuking's brother and Chu Zian's fiancé, both of whom were her disciples. It would be convenient for Bai Zihan to stay on the same peak as his fiancée and sister. Moreover, Mystic Moon Peak had the fewest disciples among the various peaks. Elder Qinglin agreed, since it was the sect leader's request, but she was not someone who would accept a disciple easily. All the disciples she chose were either very talented or worked extremely hard. If Bai Zihan displayed either trait, she wouldn't mind. But if he showed neither, she was planning to expel him within a year. She had recently heard that Bai Zihan managed to defeat Li Feng, a well-known genius, which suggested Bai Zihan wasn't as hopeless as many believed. Now that she had seen him with her own eyes, she reaffirmed that he wasn't what others said about him. Earlier, when she placed her hand on Bai Zihan, she had used at least mid-golden core stage power, yet Bai Zihan showed no signs of discomfort. This revealed that his physique was stronger than most cultivators, at least at the level of golden core stage. That alone indicated that he possessed some form of extraordinary talent. Though his cultivation wasn't too high, she had already checked that as well. Your core condensation cultivation is too low for being a disciple of Mystic Moon Peak. I hope you don't slack off in your cultivation and try to reach the golden core stage as soon as possible. Qinglin said as she handed over the disciple token to Bai Zihan. I have something to do. Chu Zian and Bai Shuking would show you around Mystic Moon Peak and help you, she said, disappearing quickly before Bai Zihan. Chu Zian and Bai Shuking, who were behind, widened their eyes in shock. First of all, the fact that their master said he wasn't too bad suggested that Bai Zihan was somewhat talented. How could they, who knew all too well about Bai Zihan's lack of talent, not be surprised by that? And although they found it hard to believe, they also knew that their master must have seen something they couldn't. Though it was still difficult to imagine, considering the person in question was Bai Zihan. After recovering from the shock, Bai Shuking immediately smacked the back of Bai Zihan's head. Ah, Bai Zihan exclaimed, clutching his head where his sister had struck him. Why did you do that? Bai Zihan asked with a pained voice. You, Bai Shuking, with anger on her face, continued. Who do you think you are to comment on master's strength? Neither are you. Can't you keep your arrogance shut for 1 second? Bai Shuking reprimanded. Although she was well aware of her master's personality and knew, she continued. It would be different if it were any other elder. Such words could easily offend someone, and while they wouldn't act against Bai Zihan because he was from the Bai clan, they would definitely hold a grudge. What did I do wrong? I just told her honestly what I thought. I was praising, Bai Zihan said. This boy, Bai Shuking didn't know whether he was being serious or not. Bai Zihan, remember this. Elder Qinglin is our master. And you need to show respect and speak respectfully. Don't talk to her like that, Bai Shuking said. Even though Master Qinglin didn't mind, that didn't mean she herself didn't mind. To her, it was only right to show respect to her esteemed master. Moreover, while Qinglin was, just, a peak master, her strength was not beneath that of the sect leader, and was even said to be equal or greater. The only reason the sect leader held that position was because he was her senior and she had no interest in managing the sect. Otherwise it was said that Qinglin could very well have become the sect leader of the Heaven Sword sect. That was also why so many disciples wished to become her disciples. But due to her harsh criteria, not many could join. Hey, Zihan, say something to this idiot as well. I don't know what kind of trouble he'll get into with this attitude and mouth of his. Bai Shuking asked for Chu Zian's help. Now that Chu Zian was her brother's fiancé, she figured the burden should be shared. But Chu Zian seemed lost in thought. Sir, but before that, Bai Zihan, when did you reach the core condensation stage? Chapter 48-48. Mystic Moon Peak. It is publicly known that Bai Zihan is only in the early stage of the core formation stage and has yet to reach the core condensation stage. Judging by his current speed, many speculate that Bai Zihan would take nearly 3 years to break through to the core condensation stage, which is also why he is called a waste. After all, with the resources of the Bai clan, even a cultivator with poor talent would have reached the core condensation stage by his age. However, Bai Zihan couldn't even do that. Truly a waste of resources poured into him by the Bai clan and his parents. Although Bai Zihan is believed to still be in the core formation stage by everyone, Elder Qinglin mentioned that he was already in the core condensation stage, and that he needs to work hard to reach the golden core stage. Judging by those words, it was easy to conclude that Bai Zihan was indeed in the core condensation stage. There was no reason to doubt Elder Qinglin's words. Although it was unknown exactly when or how she found out, Elder Qinglin wouldn't make a mistake in detecting someone's cultivation level, especially if the person were as weak as Bai Zihan. That meant Bai Zihan had reached the core condensation stage, and Chu Zian couldn't help but ask when he broke through to that realm. Although the core condensation stage wasn't anything significant in her eyes, it was a different matter if the one who reached it was Bai Zihan. After all, it hadn't even been a year since Bai Zihan entered the core formation stage. The speed was impressive. Even with Bai Shuking's talent, it had taken her more than a year to go from the core formation stage to the core condensation stage. Of course, by Bai Zihan's age, Bai Shuking had already reached the golden core stage at its peak, no less. Bai Shuking also turned her head toward Bai Zihan with the same curiosity, perhaps even more. She knew more than anyone about Bai Zihan and understood that he wasn't hiding his cultivation like some people might assume. It wasn't that he had broken through earlier and was concealing it. That simply wasn't how Bai Zihan operated. If anything, it would be good if he didn't flex his weak strength. Bai Zihan looked at Chu Zian and Bai Shuking without any worry. It wasn't like he was trying to hide his cultivation level like those secretive protagonists. He just didn't feel the need to announce it. Just a few days ago, you remember I went into seclusion after the engagement, right? I broke through then. Bai Zihan answered truthfully. A few days ago. Chu Zian muttered. Indeed, she remembered Bai Zihan had said he was going into seclusion after their engagement, though she had assumed that was just an excuse to avoid her. She didn't expect that Bai Zihan was really cultivating. Bai Shuking had a similar thought. She also assumed his so-called seclusion was just laziness, and that just a week-long session wouldn't yield any results. But it turned out she was wrong. In just that 1 week period her brother had broken through to the condensation stage. Although still not impressive for someone of his background, at least it was enough to stop people from calling him a complete waste. And with his powerful physique, both of them started to think that perhaps their master was right. He wasn't as simple as he seemed. After Bai Zihan gave his answer, both girls fell into an eerie silence. Not only did they stop talking, they stopped moving altogether. Shouldn't we go to Mystic Moon Peak? I want to check out my room. Bai Zihan finally said, once his patience wore thin. He didn't want to interrupt and risk angering his sister, but at this rate, they'd be standing there all day. Follow me. Bai Shuking said, snapping out of her thoughts. She gave Bai Zihan a strange look before turning her head. Is this stupid brother really hiding something from everyone? Thinking back on Bai Zihan's past actions, she refused to believe he had the capability to hide his abilities. She also didn't think he had worked hard to cultivate. Though recently, he had trained more than before. He was also visibly less irritated, and even made eye contact with the other party when speaking, though it still felt as if he were looking down on them. Still, she didn't believe it mattered much. Bai Zihan was still that same brat with his arrogance in the sky despite all those positive changes. Still causing trouble and making enemies wherever he went. Bai Shuking decided she would show Bai Zihan to his room. Then the important locations of Mystic Moon Peak, and return to cultivating. With everything going on, she felt like she was already falling behind and needed to make up for the time she had lost. Chu Zian stayed silent as she followed Bai Shuking up the winding mountain path. The higher they went, the more ethereal the scenery became. Mystic Moon Peak truly lived up to its name. Mist floated lazily through the air. Sunlight filtered down through ancient, towering trees, and the distant sound of flowing water made everything feel serene. Hair. Bai Shuking stopped in front of a refined courtyard. A shimmering formation glowed faintly at its gate. This is your residence. Bai Zihan looked around. A bit small. He complained the moment he saw the house. While it was refined and well kept, compared to what he was used to, this felt more like a hut. Bai Shuking's eyes twitched. The residence was the same as she had, but Bai Zihan had a gall to insult it. The outer disciples didn't have the luxury of a private courtyard like Bai Zihan. In fact, they often had to share cramped rooms with others. But Bai Zihan showed no sign of appreciation, likely because he never experienced the hardships of an outer disciple. But it'll do. Bai Zihan quickly added after seeing Bai Shuking's expression. You should settle in first, Chu Zian said. Tomorrow? We'll take you around Mystic Moon Peak so you can get familiar with the place. So chapter 4949 Ars a tour of Heaven Sword Sect. The courtyard was protected by some kind of formation and reacted when he approached with his disciple token. Bai Zihan stepped past the shimmering barrier into his new residence, taking a moment to scan the surroundings. The courtyard was modest, yet elegant. The air was thick with qi, clearly enhanced by the formation inscribed around the perimeter. Although he would like to praise the formation, its efficiency was almost 10 times lower than what he had in the Bai clan. So rather than being an upgrade, it was actually a downgrade for him. Though perhaps those from poorer backgrounds might see it differently. Inside, the residence was divided into 3 sections: a bedroom, a meditation chamber, and a bathroom. The furnishings were simple but of good quality. A sturdy wooden bed with soft cushions, and a meditation mat placed directly beneath a small skylight for natural illumination. Bai Zihan walked to the center of the room, running his fingers along the wooden table. Though smaller than his lavish quarters in the Bai clan, this place carried a unique tranquility. A quiet solitude that he found acceptable. Sitting down on the meditation mat, he leaned back slightly, gazing at the ceiling as thoughts swirled in his mind. What now? If he could peacefully cultivate without needing to worry about other matters, then perhaps becoming a disciple of the Heaven Sword Sect wasn't too bad. However, Bai Zihan knew the Heaven Sword Sect was far from peaceful. Not to mention the disciples dissatisfied with his enrollment as an inner disciple, and as the fiancé of Chu Zian. He also had to be cautious of his sister's enemies. Given how high-profile Bai Shuking was, there were undoubtedly people who disliked her, and they would likely target him instead, the easier prey. There was already an ex-fiancé of Bai Shuking. But Bai Zihan believed there would still be time before that person sought revenge. But there might be others in Heaven Sword Sect who wouldn't need to wait. There was already Shen Liang who was making things difficult. And the only saving grace was that he hadn't tried to take revenge directly. Likely to save face, and because he was still pursuing Bai Shuking. If it were someone like Bai Zihan himself, he wouldn't bother with elaborate schemes. If the other party was weaker, he'd simply crush them head on. Still, Bai Zihan knew he needed to be wary of Shen Liang. There was also Lu Tian. While Bai Zihan didn't consider him a threat, he was still a potential problem. Clearly dissatisfied and bitter with his crush's engagement. Anyway, I need more information about the Heaven Sword Sect and its different factions. Bai Zihan muttered. Should I seek out the other Bai clan members? He recalled that, apart from himself and Bai Shuking, several other Bai clan members had joined the Heaven Sword Sect. He could have them run errands and gather information for him. But where are they? Normally, they should have come to receive him. But earlier, there was no sign of them. Not a single Bai clan member showed up. Of course, knowing Bai Zihan was coming, how could they possibly show up, just to act as his lackeys? As soon as they heard the news of his admission to the Heaven Sword Sect, many of them went into seclusion or took long-term missions. I should try to figure out their whereabouts tomorrow. Bai Zihan, still unaware of the truth, assumed he'd find them eventually. Ceased the next day. Chu Zian appeared the next morning to show Bai Zihan around Mystic Moon Peak and other important places in the Heaven Sword Sect. It seemed Bai Shuking had decided her presence was unnecessary since Chu Zian was already taking care of things. And instead went into cultivation. Bai Zihan didn't care, actually, he preferred it. She wouldn't be around to annoy him. The tour began at the Central Plaza, where disciples often gathered for announcements, sparring sessions, and tasks. This is where you'll see most disciples during the day. Don't go causing trouble, or the senior disciples will put you in your place. Chu Zian warned, half serious and half joking. Most disciples of Mystic Moon Peak were well behaved. But with Bai Zihan's arrogant attitude, she doubted they'd be able to deal with him calmly. After all, if someone could remain calm even when dealing with Bai Zihan, they had to be a saint. Along the way, they met various disciples from Mystic Moon Peak, who cheerfully greeted Chu Ziyan but frowned upon seeing Bai Zihan. Still, their attitudes were much better than the ones he encountered the previous day. Some didn't seem to care about him at all, which Bai Zihan didn't mind. Next, they arrived at the Spirit Spring Pavilion, where disciples cultivated using natural qi gathered by formation arrays. A faint blue mist lingered in the air, and the space buzzed with concentrated qi. Each disciple gets an hour here every 3 days. Unless you impress the master, don't expect anything extra. Chu Ziyan explained. They continued on to the alchemy hall, the weapon forging yard, and the task board, where disciples accepted missions in exchange for contribution points. Tasks ranged from herb gathering and escort missions to demon subjugation for higher, ranked disciples. When they visited areas outside of Mystic Moon Peak, Bai Zihan realized how few disciples the peak actually had. What's more, the disciples in those other areas were far more hostile. Some even hurled insults at him. Most of these were outer disciples, clearly resentful that Bai Zihan had entered as an inner disciple thanks to connections. While they had struggled for years with no such luck. However, with Chu Ziyan beside him, no one dared act rashly. Moreover, news had already spread about what happened the day before, and how Elder Qinglin had personally accepted Bai as her disciple. By the time the tour ended, the sun had begun to set. I think that's it. There are other places but they're not that important. You'll learn about them gradually, Chu Ziyan said. Bai Zihan didn't mind. Although he still hadn't seen any of the other Bai clan members during the tour, he didn't think much of it. He had no idea they were intentionally avoiding him, and assumed he'd meet them sooner or later. Just when he thought the tour had ended, and he could return to his residence, a system notification appeared. Heaven Chosen detected. Chapter 50-50 V'd. First encounter with a protagonist. Hey, Heaven Chosen detected. The golden text flashed in Bai Zihan's vision like a divine decree from the heavens. His steps halted mid-way, eyes narrowing as another line followed. Scanning. Heaven Chosen profile unlocked. Unami Linxuan 8 age size 17 fate grade, all 3 stars, cultivation base core formation, Mead destiny. Linxuan possesses an unnatural talent for learning that far surpasses the limits of ordinary mortals. His mind is like a vast, open field that effortlessly absorbs knowledge, be it martial arts, alchemy, formation crafting, or the most ancient and profound secrets of the world. In addition to his prodigious learning ability, Lin Xuan's soul is immensely powerful, naturally resistant to any form of mental manipulation or illusion. His mind cannot be easily swayed or corrupted, and he is almost immune to mind attacks, spiritual coercion, and soul-damaging techniques. Lin Xuan. Bai Zihan muttered his name under his breath. He turned his head slightly, trying to remain subtle. But his eyes darted across the square, scanning the crowd like a hunter spotting his first prey. So the system could do this? Bai Zihan blinked, stunned for a moment. He hadn't known the system possessed this functionality until now. This was a game changer. He had always assumed he'd need to rely on instinct, caution, and careful maneuvering to avoid getting tangled with those protagonists. That was also why he had never been afraid of people like Lu Tian or Shen Liang. Individuals who flaunted their strength and ambition in an overt and flashy way. That kind of behavior was too high profile, too loud, to be the style of a true protagonist. But the unassuming ones, those who lurked in the shadows, unnoticed, that's who he feared more. And now he didn't need to rely on instincts alone. Not anymore. The system could detect Heaven Chosen and reveal their destinies. Not only that, it told him what kind of protagonist they were. This was huge. Still, it was his first encounter with a confirmed protagonist. A part of him was wary. Would this Lin Xuan suddenly fly into rage, assume he was an enemy, and try to fight him? But it didn't seem like there was any hostility. Bai Zihan's gaze swept the training grounds once more. Disciples practiced sword forms, sparred, meditated. Dozens of them, all in the same robes. Yet none stood out, at least, not at a glance. But the name was already etched into his memory. Lin Xuan, he repeated it silently, letting the system's golden words echo again in his mind. There was no divine aura, no shimmering glow, no destiny mark hovering above his head. The system didn't highlight him with a red arrow or paint a target on his back. Bai Zihan turned to Chu Ziyan, who was preparing to leave. Hey, he said casually. Do you know anyone around here named Lin Xuan? Chu Ziyan blinked, clearly caught off guard by the sudden question. Lin Xuan. She repeated, her brows furrowing slightly. Why are you asking about him? Jackpot. Judging by her reaction, Chu Ziyan clearly knew who he was. Just overheard someone talking about him. Sounded interesting, Bai Zihan replied smoothly. Chu Ziyan didn't seem entirely convinced, but after a brief pause, she responded anyway. After all, it wasn't like it was some kind of secret and Bai Zihan could easily find the information from other disciples anyways. He's not someone you'd normally notice, she said slowly. He's not even an outer disciple. Officially, he's just a servant. A handyman. That definitely caught Bai Zihan's attention. It's not even an outer disciple. Then what's a mid-core formation cultivator doing as a servant? No wonder people used to call him a waste. Even a handyman in the Heaven Sword sect. had higher cultivation than he did before his memories returned. Moreover, he had more resources, status, and connections than Lin Xuan. And yet, Lin Xuan's cultivation is higher than his, before he had regained his memories. Chu Zian continued. He was picked up by the master about 10 years ago during a sweep in the Eastern Front. A demonic cult attacked a small village. She arrived too late, everyone was dead, except for him. As expected of a protagonist, even when powerless, doomed, and left to die, a protagonist survives. Their tragedies shape their destiny. Otherwise, how is it not weird that a whole village is ruined but only one person remains alive? Just from the backstory alone, Lin Xuan screamed, main character, and his current status as a servant. Temporary for sure. Bai Zihan was certain that soon enough, Lin Xuan would rise. He'd be accepted as a disciple, then soar like a dragon and have his name spread throughout the Azure Sky Empire. Saw he was taken in out of pity. Bai Zihan asked, feigning casual interest. Chu Zian nodded. Pretty much, he's quiet. Keeps to himself. Does odd jobs around the sect. Cleans, delivers things, that sort of stuff. Bai Zihan glanced toward the far side of the courtyard. And you're sure he's not a disciple of Heaven's Sword sect? Chu Zian shot him a sideways glance. Not yet. He doesn't have the talent, or the backing. Apparently. But a few elders have taken notice. There are rumors he might be brought in as a formal disciple if he passes the next examination. Bai Zihan stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. So that's how it begins. The cliché, so familiar, yet always dangerous. A tragic past. A humble servant. Looked down upon, stepped over. But one day, he would rise from the mud, sword in hand, and shake the heavens. That was his fate. Bai Zihan's lips curled into a slow, intrigued smirk. Interesting. Chu Zian, still eyeing him, narrowed her gaze slightly. Why do you care about him anyway? Bai Zihan turned to her with a calm expression and a faint smile. No reason, he said softly. I'm just curious about all my fellow sect members. She didn't look convinced. The rumors surrounding Bai Zihan, that he didn't even treat his own servants as people, weren't exactly baseless. Though it can be argued that it wasn't just limited to the servants and pretty much every person. Anyways, this sudden curiosity which was out of nowhere made Chu Zian think about just how Lin Xuan caught Bai Zihan's eyes. Still, she didn't press him. Don't cause trouble for him, she warned. He's already had a rough life. Bai Zihan let out a low chuckle, his gaze drifting toward the shadowed edges of the mountain path. Don't worry, he said quietly, voice unreadable. Perhaps being noticed by me would be his fortune. Chu Zian frowned slightly, not understanding what he meant. She turned and left for her residence. Bai Zihan stood alone in the courtyard, his eyes locked on a figure in the distance. Lin Chen. He was there, as expected, performing the lowliest tasks around the outer courtyard. A few disciples gathered nearby, clearly treating him as nothing more than a tool. They tossed chores at him without a shred of respect. And yet Lin Chen never resisted. He accepted each task in silence, whether it was mopping the floor, lifting heavy barrels of water, or scrubbing stone tiles. His expression remained calm, stoic and unreadable, no resentment, no anger, just quiet diligence. Despite the grime covering his clothes and the dirt smudging his face, Bai Zihan noticed something strange. Lin Xuan was handsome, strikingly so. Even covered in dust and sweat, he had refined features and a natural presence. His black hair matted against his forehead, his jaw sharp, his eyes steady and unwavering. That must have been why some of the other male disciples treated him so harshly. Envy. They saw how some of the female disciples were kind to him, treating him gently, occasionally sparing him kind words or a smile. The jealousy was clear in how they treated him worse than servants and even ordered him in harsh words. Still, Lin Xuan never flinched, never retaliated, he just endured. Bai Zihan observed silently, taking it all in. Though Lin Xuan's situation was pitiful, Bai Zihan couldn't help but feel pleased. Because his suffering meant there was a chance to offer help and bind him with a debt of gratitude. Right now, he's vulnerable. Looked down on, overlooked. If I approach him now, befriend him, show him kindness, I might be able to control him. It was a rare opportunity. Without another thought, Bai Zihan began to walk across the courtyard. He didn't rush. His steps were slow, deliberate, and filled with silent authority. The moment he began moving through the square, murmurs spread. Hey look, it's Bai Zihan. Teach, look at that arrogance. Thinks he's something special just because he got accepted as an inner disciple with connections. Humph, I'd never respect someone like him. Wait, is he heading toward Lin Xuan? Yeah, he is. What's going on? Did Lin Xuan offend him? Whispers spread like wildfire as Bai Zihan strode through the crowd. Even Lin Xuan paused in his task, lifting his head slightly to watch the infamous Bai Zihan approach. Everyone was watching, curious, cautious, anxious. Bai Zihan finally came to a stop before Lin Xuan. He said nothing. He simply stood there staring at him.